Chapter 1818. Comparable to a first-rate guild. Helscythe under guild cat. Dark Knight Empire Light Shadow Citadel. A lofty tower sat in the middle of the city, and hovering above this tower was a gigantic dark purple crystal. The crystal created a magic barrier that enveloped the city, and the crystal could be seen clearly by the large number of players walking throughout the streets. There were also a large number of NPCs and dark creatures such as demons, abyssal demonkin, vampires. The multiracial population in Light Shadow City far surpassed that of Kingdom's dark cities. Many neutral race NPCs hawked their wares along the city streets, a sight that was even rare in other empires' dark cities. Light Shadow City was no less prosperous than Dark Knight City, the Dark Knight Empire's capital. Moreover, Light Shadow City had a wider variety of races. Meanwhile, a luxurious 5-story tall mansion stood in the city's lively central district. A large number of players came and went from the mansion, and all of them were either extravagantly dressed merchant players or level 54+ experts. When the players in line outside of the mansion saw these merchant and expert players, they couldn't help but feel a little envious. These players' levels and equipment are amazing. They're even better than the experts in first-rate guilds. That's only natural. Although Dark Soul is an alliance, not a guild, it periodically raids team dungeons. The alliance also frequently plunders the various large guilds' elite teams and main forces. Of course, its members have excellent weapons and equipment. Moreover, despite such banditry, the various large guilds are utterly powerless to do anything about it. For example, one first-rate guild went all out to deal with Dark Soul, but in the end, the alliance had annihilated its army, and the guild was eventually forced to disband. That's right. It was due to that success that Dark Soul is holding a mass recruitment. When I heard about it, I dropped what I was doing and came here. It would be great if I could join the alliance. If we get to join Dark Soul, we'll be able to move through the Dark Knight Empire and the several neighboring kingdoms unhindered. Even the various dark guilds will have to treat us with respect. In addition, if we join one of the top 5 adventurer teams after joining Dark Soul, such as Shadowclaw, the Copper Eagle Kingdom's #1 Dark Adventurer team, or Dark Hunters, which has recently become famous in the Dark Knight Empire, will be set for life. I hope I can get into one of the top 5 adventurer teams too. It's a pity that the requirements are extremely high. At the very least, you'll need to reach the Trial Tower's 6th floor or reach the 5th floor's late stage and have a specialty. The several thousand dark players outside of the mansion quietly discussed their desire to join Dark Soul. In the Dark Knight Empire and its several neighboring kingdoms, Dark Soul enjoyed a status rivaling that of super first-rate guilds and super guilds. Moreover, unlike most dark guilds and dark adventurer teams, Dark Soul wasn't afraid of a confrontation with the various large guilds. It even dared to challenge 2 super first-rate guilds simultaneously. To dark players who were always forced into hiding, this was a freedom they hungered for. Now that Dark Soul was recruiting members, independent dark players like themselves couldn't miss this opportunity. Meanwhile, inside an office on the mansion's topmost floor, a young man stood by the office's window. As the young man observed the independent players outside of the mansion, a grin spread across his face. This man was none other than Tiger Breaker, Dark Soul's Alliance Master. Alliance Master, since we announced the recruitment, over 2,000 players have passed our test already. In addition, over 30 well-known adventurer teams have applied to join us. With these new recruits, once we receive the resources the Starline Corporation promised, we'll be able to nurture 2 or 3 well-equipped expert legions quickly, a level 55 male elementalist wielding a withered wooden staff reported. Good. Pathless, you've done well this time. As long as the other adventurer teams deal with Zero Wing, we won't have any problems acquiring the promised resources, Tiger Breaker said, smiling. Alliance Master, you can rest assured. I've heard that Black Shark and the others have discovered the whereabouts of Zero Wing's upper echelons. The Dark Hunters and Shadowclaw have already left to set up the ambush. I believe Zero Wing will suffer severely. Once we receive the confirmation, the Starline Corporation will definitely be satisfied with our performance and pay us a portion of the agreed resources up front, the level 55 elementalist named Pathless said, smiling. Once the Starline Corporation delivered the promised resources, Dark Soul would become the Dark Knight Empire's Dark Overlord. Once it achieved that goal, Dark Soul could then secure its sovereignty over all of God's domain's dark forces. While Tiger Breaker and Pathless conversed, Pathless received a message. After reading it, however, his complexion paled. "Has something happened?" Tiger Breaker asked curiously when he noticed Pathless' gloomy expression. "I just received a message stating that the adventurer teams that went to Star Moon Kingdom to deal with Zero Wing are preparing to return," Pathless said. "Return? They've dealt with Zero Wing already?" Tiger Breaker could not help his surprise. "No, that's not right. Zero Wing is a large guild, comparable to a first-rate guild. It is impossible to deal with it so quickly. What happened?" "Zero Wing has dealt a heavy blow to the Dark Hunters and Shadowclaw. Both adventurer teams have lost over half of their people. According to Veiled Spirit, the information Starline provided was horrendously inaccurate. The Zero Wing they encountered was an entirely different guild than what the reports had mentioned. Due to this unexpected development, the various adventurer teams' commanders have decided to return to Light Shadow City and discuss the matter further." Pathless said quietly. "How is that possible? That's Dark Hunters and Shadowclaw we're talking about. They simply left to deal with Zero Wing's main force. How could they possibly lose? They even lost over half of their teams." Tiger Breaker stared at Pathless in shock. "Also, what does Veiled Spirit mean that Zero Wing is a different guild?" "Alliance Master, these are the battle videos some of the players had recorded. Why don't you take a look?" The situation confused Pathless as well. Following which, he forwarded the videos he had received from his subordinate to Tiger Breaker. "Battle videos?" Tiger Breaker began to examine the videos after he received them. The first video showed the 2,000-plus members from the Dark Hunters and Shadowclaw adventurer teams using trump cards that even surprised Tiger Breaker. Another video showed a female berserker killing Black Shark in a matter of seconds. Said female berserker had also killed nearly 100 players with one attack. The final video showed Shurfeng summoning a black dragon and killing a magic soldier in just a few seconds. The swordsman had also summoned his personal guard, rampaging and slaughtering the two dark adventurer teams and forcing them into a disadvantageous position. "This is Starline's so-called comparable to a first-rate guild?" Tiger Breaker's face flushed with anger as he watched the videos. "Are Starline's intelligence members sleeping on the job? How is this comparable to a first-rate guild? A first-rate guild's main force can wipe out two of Dark Soul's top-ranking adventurer teams. Pathless, contact Lu Xingluo and tell him that if he wants to get rid of Zero Wing, he'll have to triple the pay we agreed on. Otherwise, this transaction is over." "Understood. I'll contact him right away." Pathless was just as furious after watching the videos. He felt that the Starline Corporation had toyed with Dark Soul. Chapter 1819 Advanced Smithy Dark Knight Empire, Dark Knight City. Halside Underokyildkat. The city's central district bustled with activity and traffic. Players also crowded the shops along the streets. Players from other cities and kingdoms constantly visited these shops to purchase items. The Dark Knight Empire's businesses were far more popular than those in the neighboring kingdoms. In those kingdoms' capitals, level 50 secret silver equipment was rare on the market, but in Dark Knight City, such equipment was common. Some shops even sold level 50 fine gold equipment only. The prices for those items were absurdly high, way above market value. Due to Dark Knight City's prosperity, many players from neighboring kingdoms brought their treasures here to sell. This made the city a hub for precious treasure. The various large guilds operating in the neighboring kingdoms had even stationed some players in Dark Knight City long-term to search for purchase opportunities. Kingdoms' capitals simply couldn't compare to the Dark Knight City's liveliness. Meanwhile, a towering guild hall loomed in the center of the city's central district. The guild residents occupied an area large enough to house a stadium that could accommodate tens of thousands of people. Not only would one need a high enough status to purchase such a large plot of land, but they'd also need a frightening number of coins. The land's base price was 50,000 gold, and it was one of the few spacious lands available in Dark Knight City's central district. This guild residence is so luxurious. The owner has even built a 5-story restaurant in it. This is ridiculous. I've heard it costs quite a lot to build a restaurant in a guild residence. Such a massive restaurant should cost at least 10,000 gold to build. 10,000 gold? Aren't you looking down on Starlink a little too much? The Starlink Corporation established the guild. Including the building's various accessories, Starlink has spent a total of 20,000 gold to build this restaurant. The guild also built training rooms with magic array enhancements. I've heard that the mana density inside these training rooms is much higher than that of the outside world. You'll be far more efficient when training in those rooms. It's a pity that only Starlink's members can enjoy this benefit. Then why don't we just join Starlink? A newcomer like you? Join Starlink? Starlink is one of the top 3 guilds of the Dark Knight Empire. It's no weaker than super first-rate guilds like Crimson Emperor or Unyielding Soul. Although Starlink is mass recruiting right now, it is still out of reach for a newbie like you. While the players near Starlink's residence discussed the guild, a team of 100 players atop leopards turned onto the street. The 100-man team wore exquisite uniforms and radiated majestic auras. Many experts watched the team of players enter Starlink's residence in awe, dreaming of joining that team in the future. The 100-man team was Starlink's main force, and not long ago, the main force had defeated a level 50 100-man team dungeon's 4th boss. Now the team only needed to defeat the final boss to complete the 100-man team dungeon. This raid progression could already rival that of the Dark Knight Empire's 2 super first-rate guilds. Meanwhile, 3 people stood in the guild leader's office in Starlink's guild hall. These 3 watched the guild's main force, which had just returned from a dungeon raid, from a window. Guild leader, we have now caught up with Unyielding Soul's raid progress. Now it is only a matter of time before we surpass Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor. A level 55, Tier 2 male shield warrior carrying a silver cross shield across his back said, laughing as he turned to Lu Xinglua, who wore a set of black robes. Due to Starlink acquiring a share of the secret pavilion's magic crystal vein, the guild acquired a large number of magic crystals every day. This allowed the guild to sustain the magic arrays powering the guild's training rooms. With this, the guild's experts could continuously train and improve rapidly. Once the guild had accumulated enough Tier 2 players, it was only a matter of time before they obtained the first clear of the level 50 100-man team dungeon they were raiding. Now that their guild didn't have to worry about magic crystals, they were able to nurture guild experts much faster. In 1 or 2 months, Starlink might even surpass Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul's expert count, becoming the Dark Knight Empire's #1 guild. Not bad. The struggle for the Thorn Fortress is about to start. For a while, divert all of the magic crystals we obtain to nurturing as many Tier 2 players as possible. I want to see how Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul intend to compete with Starlink when we obtain the management rights to Thorn Fortress, Lu Xinglua said, smiling. Understood. Guild leader, rest assured. I'll make sure that we have more Tier 2 experts than Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul by the time the struggle begins, the shield warrior promised. As Lu Xinglua was about to discuss their plans for the struggle over Thorn Fortress, he received a message notification. A message from Dark Soul? Lu Xinglua muttered when he noticed the sender's identity. By the time he finished reading the message, his expression had darkened. Have the people from Dark Soul gone mad? They're actually tripling their price to deal with a small guild like Zero Wing. Guild leader, we just received a message as well. It seems that Dark Soul's members have ambushed Zero Wing's main force. However, Dark Soul's members suffered a disastrous defeat and lost over half of its numbers. I suspect that this has something to do with their new demands. Dawn Webb, a level 55 Tier 2 female elementalist and the third person in the room, explained. You're saying that Dark Soul tried to ambush Zero Wing, but the guild turned the tables on them? For a moment, Lu Xinglua thought he had heard wrong. How is that possible? It's true. Some people have posted the battle videos on the Eclipse Gate's official forums. Almost everyone in the Eclipse Gate is talking about it, Dawn Webb said as she forwarded a few battle videos to Lu Xinglua. So that is the case. Lu Xinglua could not help his frown as he watched the recordings. No wonder why a measly bug dares to oppose me. Guild leader, are we still going to take care of Zero Wing? Dawn Webb asked. Of course. Lu Xinglua said determinedly. But before we do, we have to secure the Thorn Fortress. Send a reply to Dark Soul. Tell them that they can forget about tripling the price. I'm not going to triple their pay just because they got scratched. However, I am willing to tweak the conditions of our agreement. As long as they annihilate Zero Wing, I'll give them an additional 5% of Thorn Fortress's shares. Also, tell Tiger Breaker that Zero Wing doesn't have any backers. Since Zero Wing is so strong, it must have a massive secret. If he doesn't want that secret, he better not regret his choices once Starlink claims it. He was very familiar with the Dark Hunters and Shadow Claw's strength in Dark Soul. They were merely the 4th and 5th ranked adventurer teams in the Alliance. Dark Soul was only defeated due to misinformation, yet Tiger Breaker wanted to use this opportunity to hike up the price. Understood. Dawn Webb nodded before contacting Dark Soul's representative. While Lu Xinglua discussed Zero Wing, the various superpowers had discovered the battle in the Eclipse Gate. The outcome further increased Zero Wing's fame among the various superpowers. At the same time, the guild had attracted a lot of attention. For a guild of Zero Wing's caliber, it was simply absurd to have so many Tier 2 players. The guild was definitely hiding something major. For a time, the various superpowers re-evaluated their opinions of Zero Wing. Rather than an ant, Zero Wing had become a fat piece of meat. Relay my commands. Order our subordinates to investigate the secret to Zero Wing's success. After watching the battle between Zero Wing and Dark Soul, many superpowers' upper echelons issued the same command. I've gathered you all here today to build the construction on this design, Shifeng said. He then retrieved a stack of old parchment from his bag. This stack was none other than the advanced smithy design. Someone looking at Silverwing Town from some distance away would notice that a section of the town's outer area had suddenly been cordoned off and something big was under construction there. This situation immediately attracted the attention of many resting players. Nowadays, Silverwing Town had already become the most popular town in the Orc Empire. Many guild players seeking to grind in the Orc Empire or raid the teleportation war fortresses chose to rest in Silverwing Town. Even though the war fortresses in question were very far away from Silverwing Town, players still chose Silverwing Town over other guild towns in the Orc Empire. One reason for this was the EXP buff that players could accumulate by resting in Silverwing Town, which would help greatly in leveling up. Another reason was the battle arena in the town. However, contrary to expectations, the high mana environment of Silverwing Town wasn't the reason why its battle arena was popular. Instead, the main reason for its popularity was the fact that the town was now a hub for players originating from various kingdoms and empires. Due to this situation, experts from different countries could spar with each other. Being able to spar with a large number of different experts of the same combat standard was a tremendous benefit for experts seeking to improve themselves. Now that Silverwing Town had already become the #1 town in the Orc Empire, if not for the limited space, its player population could easily exceed 1,500,000. Damn. Silverwing Town is already crowded enough, yet Zero Wing is actually wasting such a large empty space on another building. That's right. With the number of buildings in the town continuously increasing, the number of players the town can accommodate will keep declining. I'm not even sure if I can squeeze my way into the town tomorrow. The players resting in a nearby bar could not help but frown when they saw the stadium-sized structure under construction. There were simply too many players trying to enter Silverwing Town right now. To make sure Silverwing Town operated normally, Zero Wing had made it so that players who weren't Zero Wing members could stay in Silverwing Town for only 10 hours a day. If players refused to leave the town once their allocated time was up, the NPC soldiers would either forcibly remove them from the town or outright kill them. Yet despite this restriction, Silverwing Town was still packed all day round. At this point, Zero Wing had limited the number of players allowed inside the town at one time to just 800,000. If latecomers wished to enter the town, they would have to wait for someone to exit it. Hence, as more buildings rose in the empty spaces in town, the number of players allowed in would be reduced. Time passed quickly. When Shifeng finished inscribing the last magic array, 8 hours had already elapsed. The 50 advanced architects had taken only 4 hours to construct the physical structure of the advanced smithy. It's finally done. Shifeng sighed ruefully as he looked at the completed advanced smithy. Although the smithy had only 3 floors in total, it was over 20 meters in height. The advanced smithy before him was definitely a cut above basic smithies, which were only 4 meters in height. This was something that could be seen from the building's external appearance alone. However, the inside of the building was even more amazing. As Shi Feng had personally inscribed every magic array, he had a general idea of the magic array's abilities. The advanced smithy could not only repair and produce custom-made weapons and equipment but also break down weapons and equipment and return to players some materials used to make those items. Players could then use the reclaimed materials for new weapons and equipment. Although the recovery rate wasn't very high, it was still better than selling obsolete items to NPCs. If he revealed this ability, countless players would definitely swarm to the advanced smithy to break down their obsolete weapons and equipment. Meanwhile, Zero Wing could charge a small fee for the service. Good. Let's get it running now. Shi Feng then called up the advanced smithy's system interface and chose to open the building to the public. In the next moment, the magic curtain surrounding the construction site disappeared, exposing the massive building to the public. At the same time, the sound of a system notification entered Shi Feng's ears. System. Silverwing Town's popularity and security have fulfilled the requirements of an intermediate town. Do you wish to upgrade Silverwing Town? Wonderful. Just as I expected. Shi Feng could not help feeling joyful when he heard the system notification. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time now. He immediately chose to upgrade Silverwing Town. Chapter 1821. Crimson Flame Fortress. A series of system notifications assaulted Shi Feng's hearing after he chose to upgrade Silverwing Town. Orc Empire Region System Announcement. Congratulations to Silverwing Town for becoming the first intermediate town in a neutral map. Rewarding 10,000 town popularity points and 1 caravan guard order. Silverwing Town Region System Announcement. Silverwing Town will undergo a promotion. All players will be teleported out of the town in 1 minute. Silverwing Town Region System Announcement. Silverwing Town's promotion will take 30 minutes. Please wait patiently until it is complete. The system announcements repeated 3 times, echoing in players' ears in their respective regions. What? A promotion? They're already upgrading Silverwing Town. How did Zero Wing do it? Amazing. Once the town is upgraded, we'll have a much easier time getting in. For a time, Silverwing Town's players were in an uproar over the sudden promotion. As for the various large guilds' upper echelons, they wore solemn expressions when they received a report on this matter. The fat piece of meat that was Silverwing Town had already been tempting to the various major powers, and they had been trying to find a way to claim it for themselves, but the improvement speed of the town's defenses was simply absurd. The NPC soldiers the town had recruited were also becoming increasingly powerful. Including the 5 magic towers, none of these superpowers felt powerful enough to capture Silverwing Town. Hence, they decided to continue accumulating their strength for now. However, Silverwing Town's promotion to an intermediate town was a huge problem. Not only would Silverwing Town be able to construct more defensive structures, but the number of NPC soldiers it could hire had also increased from 1,000 to 2,000. That would effectively double the town's defensive capabilities. In terms of basic attributes, NPC soldiers were far superior to players. In addition, Silverwing Town soldiers were more than 10 levels higher than current players. If players wished to deal with these NPCs, they would have to employ Zerg tactics. Now that the town had twice as many NPC soldiers to protect it, they would need at least twice the manpower to defeat these NPCs, making Silverwing Town even more difficult to capture. Shortly after the system announcements, the players in Silverwing Town were all teleported a considerable distance away. However, instead of leaving the area, the teleported players stood outside of the town. In fact, players who grinded in the Orc Empire hurried to join the crowd. Meanwhile, news of Silverwing Town's promotion quickly spread to the various superpowers. Zero Wing is impressively efficient. It's a pity that there is no longer a point in upgrading Silverwing Town, Yuan Tiexin said, sighing slightly when he read the report he had just received. Uncle Yuan, now that Silverwing Town has been upgraded to an intermediate town, it will be able to accommodate more players and increase Zero Wing's income by multiple times. Why would that be pointless? Purple Jade asked curiously. I guess it's expected that you don't know. Yesterday, I received news stating that 9 Dragons Emperor has secretly joined hands with Blackwater and Beast Emperor and they are preparing to raid the Orc Empire's Crimson Flame Fortress, Yuan Tiexin said. The Crimson Flame Fortress is located in the Orc Empire's inner region and on one of the safer paths to the Orc capital city. In addition, the fortress offers teleportation services. Once the Crimson Flame Fortress has been captured, it'll generate massive profits for the three involved parties. It'll also allow them to raid the Orc capital city far more quickly. What? That's the Crimson Flame Fortress. Based on our investigations, its raid difficulty ranks among the top 5 teleportation war fortresses in the Empire. It is too difficult for current players to raid, and on top of that, dark players will definitely try to interfere. Do they really dare to raid the Crimson Flame Fortress? The news astonished Purple Jade. There were countless orcs inside the Crimson Flame Fortress, and the lowest leveled among them was level 60, with the highest leveled orcs being level 75. Furthermore, the fortress was protected by many war weapons and mythic orcs. That is exactly why Nine Dragons Emperor and Blackwater are working with Beast Emperor. Based on what we know so far, Beast Emperor will guard the battlefield with his evil beast army. Meanwhile, Blackwater and Nine Dragon Emperor's armies will be responsible for sieging the fortress. With the evil beast army in their way, the dark guilds and dark players won't try to interfere, Yuan Tiexin explained. Once they capture Crimson Flame Fortress, Silverwing Town's status in the Orc Empire will become quite awkward. Thus far, the Secret Pavilion had only conducted a preliminary investigation on the regional dungeon Orc capital city. Even so, the resources they had discovered had far exceeded their expectations. Not only did the regional dungeon offer a large number of magic crystals, but players would also level 50% faster if they grinded in the area. Most importantly, the Orc capital city and intermediate city could be captured. If one captured this intermediate city, they would earn just as much profit as the Secret Pavilion's magic crystal vein earned. Moreover, they wouldn't need to station a large force of players to protect the city long term. If Blackwater and Nine Dragons Emperor acquired the Orc capital city, with the wealth of resources they earned through the city, they could easily destroy Silverwing Town. The two entities might even be able to threaten Zero Wing's safety in Starmoon Kingdom. This was because Beast Emperor bore an irreconcilable vengeance against Zero Wing. Setting aside the fact that Beast Emperor had a significant portion of his foundation within Starmoon Kingdom and would need to take over the kingdom to further his development, the Secret Pavilion had recently learned that of the 5 precious evil god apostle slots Beast Emperor had, Shifeng had destroyed 2. This loss had severely impacted Beast Emperor's development. If Beast Emperor got his hands on the Orc capital city's resources, he'd have a good chance of taking over Starmoon Kingdom and yanking Zero Wing out of the game by its roots. Uncle Yuan, why don't we notify Zero Wing? Purple Jade asked. Forget it. Even if Zero Wing found out, there is nothing it can do. Although Zero Wing's main force had displayed outstanding combat power in the Eclipse Gate, this revelation will not change Zero Wing's situation. While Zero Wing is fully capable of defending its territory, it simply doesn't have enough forces to launch an offensive assault on Beast Emperor. This is also the greatest problem that upstart powers with little to no background normally face, Yuan Tiexin said, shaking his head. Had Zero Wing agreed to partner with us, they might have been able to stop Beast Emperor's group. However, with Zero Wing's current forces, even if they gain the full support of Phoenix Rain, Beast Emperor is impossible to stop. In God's domain, many upstart powers rose to prominence every day, but these powers had a fatal flaw: they were ignorant of greater powers. They all deemed themselves capable of rivaling true superpowers. Although Zero Wing was superior to most of the up-and-coming powers in God's domain, it wouldn't be easy for the guild to become a true superpower. There would be plenty of other powers trying to use Zero Wing as a stepping stone and rise to prominence themselves. Meanwhile, in the Orc Empire's Silverwing Town. After a half-an-hour wait, the recently promoted Silverwing Town appeared before the crowd. Silverwing Town now occupied twice as much space as the old version. It was also much closer to the primordial divine ruin, which was now within range of the town's magic towers. Since the town was in a neutral map, Silverwing Town's walls had grown taller as well. Now they were 7 meters tall. Divine runes had been carved into the walls, preventing players from vaulting over and enhancing the wall's defense. He had spared no expense in outfitting Silverwing Town with the most extravagant buildings he could afford precisely for this moment. This was also Neutral Town's secret. Chapter 1822 Town Opening Silverwing Town. Under Shi Feng's command, it took less than 20 minutes to complete the preparation work for Silverwing Town's reopening. Moreover, thanks to the reserve NPC guards Magic King Craig Midlands had prepared beforehand and the large number of NPCs that had come looking for work after the town's promotion completed, they had quickly filled the additional 1,000 NPC soldier slots Silverwing Town had gained. Craig Midlands himself had inspected all 1,000 of these new NPC soldiers. Due to Silverwing Town's steady development, not only had more NPCs arrived to apply for a soldier position, but higher quality NPCs had applied. Normally, when a basic town was upgraded to an intermediate town, it would struggle to fill the additional 1,000 soldier slots within a short time. The town would be fortunate to recruit around 300 Tier 1 NPCs and a dozen Tier 2 NPCs during the first week after the town's promotion. Most NPCs that applied were only elite rank. The town would slowly have to accumulate, nurture, or replace its NPC soldiers to increase the number of Tier 2 NPC soldiers it had. Yet due to Craig Midlands' fame, over 3,000 NPCs had applied to work for Silverwing Town as soon as the promotion was complete. Including the 300 Tier 1 NPCs Craig Midlands had kept on reserve, it took no time for Silverwing Town to recruit 1,000 NPCs. Among the NPCs recruited, over 100 were Tier 2 NPCs with the rest being Tier 1 NPCs. Normally, an intermediate town would need around 2 weeks to accumulate 100 Tier 2 NPCs. More Tier 2 NPCs would only show up and apply to work for the town after it increased its popularity. After all, Tier 2 NPCs were not abundant in God's domain. Even Zero Wing City only had a little over 2,000 Tier 2 NPC soldiers thus far, while the rest were Tier 1 NPCs. However, although Silverwing Town had plenty of high-quality NPC soldiers, Zero Wing had spent over 20,000 gold to outfit these NPCs with proper weapons and equipment. In God's domain, NPC soldiers did not come with their own items. Like players, they had to be armed. This was an important factor in strengthening a town's defenses. Of course, some NPCs would bring their own weapons and equipment when applying to become soldiers, but their items were usually low quality. They were much weaker than the standardized weapons and equipment the system provided. Naturally, the combat power these NPCs would be able to display would depend on the quality of their weapons and equipment. For example, an NPC with bronze equipment and an NPC in mysterious iron equipment would have around a 20% difference in combat power. While 20% might not seem like much to players, but it was a lot for NPCs who possessed much higher basic attributes. When Stone Forest Town and Zero Wing City had been constructed, Zero Wing had lacked funds. Shi Feng had only been able to outfit his NPC soldiers with the cheapest bronze weapons and equipment available. He had only started to upgrade the NPC's gear after the guild had money to spare. A large fraction of the investments needed to develop a town had to be spent on the NPC soldiers' weapons and equipment. In addition, these weapons and equipment needed regular repairs, which would also cost a considerable amount of money. These reasons were why most of the various large guilds avoided owning too many towns. This even held true for the various superpowers. Although the superpowers occupied many towns, they would not arm every one of them to the teeth. Instead, they would focus on developing a few select towns. However, arming the NPC soldiers with better items was why many first-rate guilds' headquarters were able to withstand sieges from super first-rate and super guilds. The longer a town developed, the stronger the NPC soldiers guarding it would become. When fully equipped with top-tier equipment, NPC soldiers could even contend with players of a higher tier. Fortunately, with the exception of some extremely powerful top-tier equipment, the majority of the weapons and equipment NPC soldiers used could be purchased from the system with coins. There was no need for players to invest time and effort into farming weapons and equipment. Hence, Shi Feng had spent over 20,000 gold to arm the newly recruited NPCs. A full set of level 50 to 100 bronze equipment would cost 2 gold coins. It was fairly normal to find NPCs who sold magic crystals carrying a stock of 5,000 to 10,000. On the other hand, one would be hard-pressed to purchase 5,000 to 10,000 magic crystals from players. NPC merchants occasionally sold rare advanced designs as well. Although these designs would similarly be overpriced, their rarity made the cost worth it. After all, it was almost impossible to purchase advanced designs from other players. If one were extremely lucky, they could even find NPC merchants that sold fragmented legendary items or clues leading to such treasures. Although such occurrences were ridiculously rare, based on player-collected statistics, the more NPCs merchants that visited a guild town, the higher the ruling guild's chances were of finding an NPC that carried such items and clues. Naturally, every clue that led to a fragmented legendary item was extremely valuable. Since there was a possibility to acquire fragmented legendary items, Shifeng wouldn't miss the opportunity. Since players in the past hadn't often spoken about how they had acquired their fragmented legendary items, Shifeng knew very few methods to do so. In fact, most players wouldn't even reveal the fact that they owned a fragmented legendary item. Hence, Shifeng only knew about the relatively famous fragmented legendary items. However, the methods of acquiring those items were incredibly demanding, so he couldn't hunt them down at this stage of the game. Since you understand the risks involved, that is fine. If you wish to set up a trade route to Silverwing Town, it will cost you a base fee of 10,000 gold and 5,000 magic crystals. As you possess an ordinary caravan guard order, you are only allowed to form a 100-man team. The team will require a minimum of one advanced magician to carve magic arrays on the route to repel monsters, Senior Administrator Elk explained. Lord Protector, may I know if you will need me to introduce you to some mercenaries to accompany on your journey? Of course, Shifeng said, nodding. The Caravan Guard Order was a trigger to activate the special quest for setting up a trade route. While Shifeng could rely on players to complete this quest, he could also enlist the help of the Adventurers Association's mercenaries. At this stage of the game, NPC mercenaries were undoubtedly much stronger than players. Hence, players that acquired a Caravan Guard Order at this stage of the game would generally hire mercenaries to aid them. Unfortunately, the price was quite high. In the past, some guilds had tried to save money, confident that their members would be strong enough to handle the task. However, while Zero Wing's main force was very powerful, the trade route he wanted to establish required crossing the border into the Or Empire. When establishing a trade route, the system would occasionally send monsters to interfere. These monsters would be 15 levels higher than the local monsters, and many of the Or Empire's monsters were level 60 or higher. In that case, the interfering monsters would be level 75 and above once he entered the Empire. These monsters were too high of a level for Zero Wing's main force members at this time, so they weren't suitable for this quest. Alright. Here is a list of mercenaries willing to undergo this challenge with you, Lord Protector, Elk said before handing Shifeng a list. The quest to set up a trade route was very special and very dangerous. Players couldn't simply hire whatever NPC mercenaries they wished. The available mercenaries would depend on the player's status in the Adventurers Association. The higher one's status was, the more NPC mercenaries they could choose from for the operation. Amazing. 4-star treatment in the Adventurers Association is really a great help when setting up a trade route. Shifeng could not help his surprise when he read the list. During his previous life, he had only been able to recruit 3-star Tier 2 NPCs at best. As a result, he had struggled to set up trade routes for Shadow's neutral towns. Now, however, even 2-star Tier 3 NPCs had applied to join his quest, not to mention 3-star Tier 2 NPCs. He had to admit that the Spirit Slayer Advanced title came with some awesome benefits. Without hesitation, Shifeng spent over 15,000 gold to hire 97 mercenaries, spending almost every coin he had on hand. The weakest mercenaries he hired were level 80 3-star Tier 2 NPCs, with the strongest being level 83 2-star Tier 3 NPCs. Overall, his team had 15 Tier 3 NPCs. After Shifeng handled the necessary procedures and learned how to draw the necessary advanced magic array, he summoned the level 85 Anna and level 83 Kite. With 97 other NPCs in tow, he grandly departed Star Moon City, riding secret silver transport carriages. The secret silver transport carriages were an extraordinary sight to behold. 5-meter-tall lightning-horned earth dragons pulled the carriages behind them. The earth dragons themselves were great lords, and watching the caravan move down the city streets was spectacular. What's going on? Is the city hosting some kind of event? That's not it. The lead transport carriage's driver is a player. Could this be a player-triggered event? That player is wearing Zero Wing's guild emblem. Zero Wing is so awesome. It can actually produce such powerful carriages. Prep. There are over 10 Tier 3 NPCs in the caravan. This is ridiculous. Chapter 1824. Strong Legion. Shortly after the 10 secret silver transport carriages being pulled by lightning-horned earth dragons appeared on the streets of Starmoon City, the sight quickly sent the entire city into an uproar. The adventurer teams that made a living by delivering items were green with envy as they looked at the transport carriages. Transport carriages might not seem particularly important in the game right now, as players could simply store items inside their bag spaces and teleport to other cities. However, as players reached higher levels, transport carriages would become increasingly relevant. The number of items that could not be stored inside players' bag space would increase as players progressed further into the game. Such non-bag space items were extremely valuable, and the only way to transport them was via transport carriages. Meanwhile, the adventurer teams could purchase only horse-drawn transport carriages. On the other hand, the secret silver transport carriages had great lord-ranked lightning-horned earth dragons pulling them. There was simply no comparison between the two. Just the aura of the earth dragons was enough to scare away the mobs one would normally come across out in the fields. Not to mention the transport carriage itself was like a huge house. One could easily imagine how many non-bag space items the transport carriage could store in such a huge transport carriage. As expected of Starmoon Kingdom's number 1 guild. I wonder when our adventurer team will be able to obtain a transport carriage like that? That's right. If we have a transport carriage like that, we can earn over 10 gold per delivery trip. The adventurer team members seated on the advanced transport carriages parked along the streets cast covetous looks at the lightning-horned earth dragons. Currently, the minimum price in the delivery business for transporting a non-bag space item was 1 silver coin. The price scaled up depending on the distance traveled. Meanwhile, the adventurer team members estimated that the secret silver transport carriage could carry over 100 non-bag space items. This assumption was because the advanced transport carriages they owned were only the size of an ordinary horse carriage but could already carry a maximum of 60 non-bag space items. No matter how they looked at it, the house-sized transport carriages should be capable of transporting at least 100 non-bag space items. Only Shifeng knew that the value of the secret silver transport carriage was actually not the slightest bit inferior to a secret silver speedboat. The secret silver transport carriage could carry 350 non-bag space items and 30,000 bag space items. The 10 transport carriages lent to him this time were meant to convey the materials needed to carve special magic arrays. Each of these materials took up 1 non-bag space slot. Moreover, in terms of speed, the lightning-horned earth dragons were superior to even dark gold mounts. While the players on the streets were talking about the secret silver transport carriages, the lightning-horned earth dragons took only a few seconds to disappear from everyone's sight as they galloped toward the city's main gate. Although some members of large guilds tried to follow Shifeng and investigate his actions, their mysterious iron mounts could only eat the earth dragon's dust as they watched the secret silver transport carriages disappear from view. Sure enough, secret silver transport carriages are really fast. If Zero Wing can acquire one, transporting diamond wood and 7 luminaries crystals on land would be a lot easier. Shifeng could not help but be astonished as he looked at the scenery rapidly flashing by. If a transport carriage possessed such speed, even robbing it would become a very tough proposition. However, during his previous life, first-rate guilds would be very fortunate if they could acquire even bronze transport carriages, let alone secret silver transport carriages. After traveling for about half an hour, Shifeng arrived at a crossroads. He then stopped the caravan and had all the NPCs stand guard. Someone traveling from Starmoon City to Silverwing Town on a dark gold mount wouldn't be able to complete the journey even after traveling continuously for 5 or 6 days. Chapter 1825. One success was built atop the sacrifice of thousands. As the NPC legion pushed back the approaching orc and monster army, a wall of corpses quickly formed on each side of the road. These NPCs are so strong. I get the feeling that this NPC team can even raid an ordinary guild town. I know, right? Just look at those tier 3 NPCs going. They are throwing level 70+ great lords with a single hit. Their individual combat power is likely even higher than Grand Lords of the same rank. Even if these Tier 3 NPCs aren't enough to raid a guild town, they're more than enough to kill every one of us. As expected of Star Moon Kingdom's #1 expert. With the ability to control so many powerful NPCs, Black Flame could easily annihilate armies of tens of thousands of players. It's no wonder why the various superpowers are helpless against Zero Wing. The various spectating guilds and adventurer teams gulped as they watched the fight between the NPCs and monsters. Tier 2 NPCs were much stronger than Tier 2 players of the same level. Only peak experts with several pieces of epic equipment could possibly contend with an ordinary Tier 2 NPC. If Tier 2 players tried to face a Tier 2 NPC that was over 20 levels higher, they could only wait for their deaths. As for Tier 3 NPCs, they would only need a few moves to finish off Tier 2 players. If the targeted Tier 2 players lacked defensive capabilities, they might die after one hit. If these NPCs turned their blades against Tier 1 players like themselves, a single attack would be more than enough to kill several of them instantly. Blackwater's members are probably doomed. That's right. Blackwater has been picking a lot of fights with Zero Wing in the Orc Empire. Now that Black Flame has found some of Blackwater's members, he'll massacre them. The various large guilds members couldn't help but watch Blackwater's members with pity as they fought the local orcs. Nowadays, Blackwater and Zero Wing's members would fight whenever they came across each other in the fields. Although Blackwater currently had over 1,000 members present, before the Sword King the group was a joke. Furthermore, Black Flame had a team of level 80+ NPCs with him. This further reduced the chances of Blackwater's members escaping this place alive. Why is Black Flame here? We're doomed. We're doomed. Fear colored the faces of Blackwater's members as they watched Shifeng. They had experienced the man's might firsthand, so they knew just how powerful he was. Black Flame was truly unstoppable. He could easily single out and kill a specific player while surrounded by an army of tens of thousands. Although their team currently had over 1,000 well-equipped elite and expert players, Black Flame could annihilate them all by himself. Their only option was to run. If others heard their thoughts, they'd be a laughingstock. If 1,000 elite players simultaneously attacked a single expert, one move should be enough to end the battle. Even a peak expert would try to avoid a 1,000-man enemy elite team. How could a lone player possibly defeat an army of elite players? However, they knew very well that the likelihood of such a situation was high. Not only did Black Flame possess multiple large-scale destruction spells, but he also had ridiculous movement speed. He also had enough strength to contend with mythic monsters. In addition, he was capable of summoning powerful monsters. It wasn't an exaggeration to call Black Flame a one-man army. Damn it! Why is he here? Singular Burial paled when he saw Shifeng's cloaked figure. Looking at Shifeng now, Singular Burial was no longer as confident as he had been in the past. He harbored no thoughts of fighting Shifeng as he knew that doing so would be a waste of energy. In fact, it would only lead to a quicker death. Singular Burial could not understand why Shifeng had come to a backwater place like this. They were currently in the Orc Empire's outer region. For an expert of Shifeng's caliber, only grinding or questing in the Empire's core would be worth his time. He had struggled to stabilize his standing in Blackwater. Chapter 1826. Vulcan's Sigh. After Shifeng left, all of the various large guilds members visibly relaxed. Black Flame is leaving just like that? He doesn't intend to deal with Blackwater's members? My guess is that Black Flame finds it beneath him to deal with them. I've watched the battles that occurred at the Primordial Divine Ruin. Black Flame had soloed a mythic monster. Then he sent both Blackwater's army and the Evil Beast army running with their tails tucked between their legs. A measly 1,000-man elite team probably isn't worth his effort. Black Flame is too strong. His presence alone was enough to make the various large guilds shrink back with fear. It's no wonder why Black Flame is recognized as Star Moon Kingdom's #1 expert. He is far stronger than those famous peak experts. The adventurer teams watching from a short distance away were shocked when they looked at the various guild players, who watched the departing convoy cautiously. They had never thought that the presence of a single player would be enough to deter so many guild players. They had all heard many rumors about Black Flame, but they had assumed the rumors were jokes and baseless assertions. However, they simply treated those rumors as jokes and baseless assertions. However, after seeing the man in person today, they finally understood that the rumors were actually true. In fact, Black Flame was even scarier than the rumors made him out to be. Because of this discovery, many of these independent players, who hadn't been interested in joining any guild, began to have second thoughts. They all considered joining Zero Wing, especially the swordsman players. This was especially true for swordsman players. Unbeknownst to Shifeng, his casual action of sparing Blackwater's members had made many independent players in the Orc Empire reconsider their position about joining his guild. At the same time, news of Shifeng's appearance in the Orc Empire had reached the various dark players hiding in the Empire. "Commander, we have discovered Black Flame." "Where?" "He's near the Orc Empire's border. However, there are quite a number of NPCs moving with him. Taking him out won't be easy. Follow after him for now. I'll gather our members and head over as soon as possible. As long as our Wind's Arrow adventurer team kills Black Flame once, we'll qualify to join Dark Soul. We cannot miss this opportunity, so follow him closely." Understood. The various dark adventurer teams operating within the Orc Empire began to make their way towards Shifeng. Some time ago, the Dark Knight Empire's Dark Soul had placed a bounty on Zero Wing. For each Zero Wing upper echelon killed, one could earn a dark mutation slot. If one managed to kill Zero Wing's guild leader, regardless of whether an individual or an entire team completed the task, both would be welcomed to join Dark Soul. Individuals would be given command of a new adventurer team in Dark Soul. To players that operated in the Dark Soul's reputation was equivalent to that of a super guild. Joining the Dark Alliance and become one of its commander-level figures was no different than becoming the vice guild leader in a super guild. Why wouldn't such an offer be tempting? The various dark adventurer teams and several dark guilds began an enthusiastic search for Black Flame. Although Black Flame was very powerful, even giants would fall against overwhelming numbers. God's Domain also had many special methods to kill players. Dark Soul had not specified a requirement to defeat Black Flame with raw strength. The lightning-horned earth dragons dashed down the Orc Empire's gravel roads. As Shifeng ventured deeper into the Orc Empire, stronger monsters and orcs showed up to hinder his progress. Initially, most of the monsters had only been chieftains, but now lords began to target his caravan. If not for the lightning-horned earth dragons being level 80 great lords, the monsters in their way would have stopped the caravan long ago. Sure enough, it really is difficult to set up a trade rule in a land ruled by the dark forces. Shifeng inwardly celebrated as he watched one lord-ranked orc get knocked aside after another. Fortunately, he was the first player to set up a trade route in Starmoon Kingdom and had the privilege of using the lightning-horned earth dragons. Normally, players would only have access to mysterious iron transport carriages, which were only pulled by lord-ranked monsters, when setting up a trade route. Traveling through a neutral map under the Dark Forces rule with such carriages would be extremely difficult. He would have had to stop his progress whenever he was attacked. In that case, he would have had to rely on the NPCs he had hired to clear a path or dispatch a large number of his guild members to do so. With the lightning-horned earth dragons, however, he could simply bulldoze his way through. Though due to the large number of orcs and monsters blocking his path, his advance had slowed considerably. Now the transport carriages only moved a little faster than players running at full speed. Meanwhile, this was only the beginning of the Dark Forces territory. As Shifeng traveled deeper into the Empire, he would encounter more numerous and powerful orcs and monsters, which even the Tier 3 NPCs accompanying him would have some trouble with. After about 8 hours, Shifeng arrived before an orc fortress. According to the system map, the fortress was the final point for the trade route. This quest. Does it really want me to build the expulsion magic array inside the fortress? As Shifeng watched the patrolling orcs on the fortress's walls, he wondered if he had read his system map wrong. This was nothing like the orcs he had faced on the road earlier. On his way here, he had faced wild orcs or orc patrols, but these orcs were members of the Orc Empire's well-trained army. Fortunately, due to his quest, the fortress only had around 3,000 orc guards, far fewer than normal. In return, however, their levels and rank had increased significantly. Now, the weakest orc guarding the fortress was a chieftain, with the majority of the orcs being lords. The leader of these creatures was even a level 80 mythic ranked orc general. After spotting Shifeng's caravan, the orc general raised its greatsword with one hand and loosed a furious roar. Suddenly, the army of 3,000 orcs stationed inside the fortress flooded out of the fortress's gates and marched towards Shifeng's caravan. Sturdy, shield-wielding orcs occupied the front line while agile, bow-wielding orcs moved at the rear. The orc army's approach even made the NPCs with Shifeng nervous. Shifeng could see well over 100 Great Lord-ranked orcs and over a dozen Grand Lords. This force was on an entirely different level than the caravan's contingent. As Shifeng wondered if something had gone awry, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, you have triggered the epic trade route quest Orc King's Ambitions. You may choose to accept or abandon this quest. If you complete this quest, you will receive a commendation from Starmoon Kingdom and qualify to build an airport. Abandoning this quest will not affect your original trade route quest. If you choose to abandon this quest, the system will designate an alternative path for the trade route. You have 3 minutes to consider. An epic trade route quest? Shifeng was stunned when he read the system notification, but after seeing the quest rewards he couldn't help his growing excitement. Could this be the reward for being the first player to set up a trade route? The qualifications to build an airport. Countless guilds in neutral maps dreamed of acquiring this qualification, but very few succeeded in doing so. In the past, not a single guild had revealed how they had managed it. Meanwhile, the sensational scene at the Orc Fortress stupefied the various dark adventurer teams and dark guilds following Shifeng. Crap. What's going on? Is Black Flame trying to raid the fortress? Does he intend to raid a fortress by himself? Is he crazy? Black Flame is insane. That's an orc fortress we're talking about. Although he can stand against a mythic monster for some time, capturing a fortress is a different story entirely. Even if he has some NPCs to support him, ambushing a fortress is impossible. As the dark players watched the distance between the orc army and Shifeng's caravan decrease, they were dumbfounded. They had watched many guilds try to raid one of the Orc Empire's fortresses before, but this was the first time they had seen a single player attempt it. Commander, what should we do? Should we attack Black Flame? These orcs are too high-leveled. Moreover, there's a mythic orc among them. If we attack carelessly we might get dragged into the fight. Let's wait. It won't be too late to take action once the orc army pushes Black Flame and his NPCs back. All of the dark adventurer teams and dark guilds following Shifeng came to the same decision. Meanwhile, as the orc army approached the caravan, Shifeng and his NPCs prepared for battle. Let's give it a try, Shifeng decided after analyzing his current combat power and the challenge. The quest had only mentioned that he needed to set up an expulsion magic array in the fortress, not capture the fortress. There was a huge difference between the two tasks. Naturally, the former was far easier. Moreover, this was a valuable opportunity. It would be a huge waste to give it up. Grinding his teeth, Shifeng accepted the quest. He then pulled a magic scroll with crimson divine runes from his bag. This magic scroll was none other than the Tier 4 continuous use magic scroll, Vulcan's Sigh, which he had acquired from the gold magic crystal treasure chest in the Eclipse Throne. The magic scroll was even more valuable than ordinary epic equipment. Vulcan's Sigh was also an extremely rare summoning scroll. He had hoped to save the scroll as a trump card for any future guild wars, but using it to complete this epic trade route quest was worth the expenditure. Following which, Shifeng injected 1,000 magic crystals of mana into the magic scroll and activated it. In the next moment, a crimson, threefold magic array manifested beneath Shifeng's feet. The sky also began to transform and the earth started to quake. Why did the sky suddenly go dark? Everyone noticed dark clouds block out the sun. A moment later, the space around Shifeng began to freeze. The spectating dark players felt a powerful aura assault their minds and bodies. Chapter 1827, Battle of Monsters. As the dusky space froze, over 24 magic arrays appeared in the cloudy sky, radiating a light that illuminated the orc fortress and its surroundings. As these magic arrays manifested, the dark players felt their aura's intensity increase, making their bodies feel much heavier than a moment ago. As the heavy feeling grew, they began to panic. What's going on? Why can't I move? What did Black Flame do? Everyone quickly discovered that they couldn't even move a finger, much less walk away. They felt as if time had stopped. Moreover, they weren't the only ones subjected to this phenomenon. Even the orc army had fallen deathly silent. Some orcs had even lost strength to stand and fell to a knee, terrified. Following which, the sky shattered and formed a massive black hole. If one looked closely, they would notice a pair of flaming eyes as large as small mountains within the black hole. As these eyes appeared, the pressure on the players present increased yet again. Immediately, all of the orcs, including the mythic-ranked orc general, slumped to the ground and shuddered in fear. What's going on? It's over. We're doomed. Damn it. This must be a trap Black Flame set up. We've been tricked. As the dark players looked up at the massive pair of eyes, they sensed their impending death and destruction. They weren't even ants before the owner of those eyes. As long as the creature willed it, its aura alone would slay these players. It wouldn't even need to attack. The players from the various dark adventurer teams and dark guilds suddenly regretted their decision to target Shifeng. Just as everyone cowered before their doom, the pair of flaming orbs vanished abruptly before fire began to pour from the black hole, raining down on the Orc Empire like meteors. Boom. A series of explosions shook the Orc fortress in the area. The ground trembled so violently that the dark players who stood quite a distance away nearly lost their footing. The shower of fire continued for 6 seconds, transforming the earth under the Orc army into a burning hellscape. By the time flames stopped pouring out of the black hole, the chieftain-ranked orcs had been wiped out while the lords sustained heavy injuries. The several thousand dark players gasped when they saw this outcome. With one attack, Shifeng had obliterated half of the entire orc army. However, before the crowd could recover from their shock, the fire on the battlefield converged and transformed into easily over 100 flame giants. The weakest among these flame giants was a level 80 High Lord, whereas the strongest 5 were level 82 Grand Lords. Vulcan's Sai is actually so powerful? Even Shifeng was astonished as he gazed at the flame giants. He had assumed that he'd be lucky to summon even one Grand Lord. He had never expected for Vulcan's Sai to summon such a powerful legion of flame giants. After the single activation of Vulcan's Sai, Shifeng noticed that the magic scroll had lost half of its durability. In other words, Vulcan's Sai was a continuous-use magic scroll that could only be used twice. Moreover, he would have to wait 2 natural days before he could use the scroll again. He could not use it consecutively. However, Shifeng was very satisfied with the result. Although most Tier 4 continuous-use magic scrolls could be used 4 to 6 times, their effects couldn't compare to Vulcan's Sai. The Flame Legion's arrival instantly disrupted the Orc army's formation. The 20-meter-tall Grand Lord-ranked flame giants sent over a dozen orcs flying with a single slap. In terms of strength, even the Grand Lord-ranked orc warriors were no match for the Grand Lord-ranked flame giants. For a time, the legion of flame giants brought chaos to the orc army. The battle between the flame giants and orcs was earth-shattering. Sounds of slaughter and explosions echoed across the barren plains that surrounded the orc fortress, stupefying the dark players that hid in the distant forest. Although the battle only involved several thousand monsters, it was no less intense than a battle between tens of thousands of players. If players joined this fight, even the shockwaves from the orcs and flame giants clashing would vaporize them. While the orc army tangled with the Flame Legion, Shifeng used the opportunity to lead his NPC mercenaries past the orc army and towards the orc fortress. He did not need to exterminate the orc army to capture the fortress. He only needed to set up the expulsion magic array inside of it. Moreover, Shifeng did not think that he could defeat the orc army. The army was led by a mythic orc after all. Although the flame giants were powerful, a mythic-ranked creature could easily suppress them. Furthermore, the Flame Legion was badly outnumbered. It was only a matter of time before the orcs wiped the legion out. When Shifeng was within 500 yards of the fortress, the level 80 orc general discovered his group. With a roar, the orc general raised its great sword, firing a chilling beam attack at the Grand Lord-ranked flame giant before it. The attack sent the flame giant flying back as a layer of ice formed on the ground before the orc general. The mythic orc then led a group of subordinates as they ran down the icy path its attack had created to block the fortress's entrance with their bodies. Other orcs also began to abandon their fights with the flame giants, charging towards Shifeng's group. Sure enough, they won't let me through so easily. Shifeng smiled bitterly as he looked at the orc general before the fortress's entrance. He then turned toward Anna and ordered, "Do it." Nodding, Anna began to chant as she approached the orc general. When less than 100 yards separated the two, Anna finished her spell and pointed her staff at the orc general. Suddenly, a level 85 Tier 4 Valkyrie descended from the sky. Using an advanced instantaneous movement, the Valkyrie instantly appeared before the orc general and swept the lightning spear in her hands at the mythic orc. Boom! Failing to react in time to the strike, the orc general and a dozen or so great lord-ranked orcs got sent flying over 100 yards to the side. The Valkyrie's frightening strength had even shattered the ground before her, creating a small ravine. Good. Shifeng then led his group into the fortress, commanding his NPC mercenaries to guard the entrance while he headed for the system-designated location to set up the expulsion magic array. The fortress's entrance wasn't particularly large. 20 NPCs would be more than enough to form a barricade. Fortunately, the fortress's walls had been enhanced with magic runes, and not even mythic monsters would be able to jump over them. Now the orcs could only enter the fortress if they destroyed its walls or the NPCs guarding the entrance. The fortress walls were quite sturdy, and it would even take a mythic monster some time to destroy them. By the time the orc general created an opening, Shifeng would have long since completed his task. The only way the orc general could get into the fortress before Shifeng finished was through the main entrance. Hence stationing guards would be enough. Very quickly Shifeng found the targeted location. Wasting no time, he immediately took out a large blue crystal from his epic-ranked spatial bag and began to engrave the expulsion magic array. As the seconds ticked by, more orcs tried to force their way into the fortress. The Tier 2 NPCs defending the entrance began to die, one after another. Only the Tier 3 NPCs barely held their ground against the Grand Lord-ranked orc warriors. The Valkyrie fought a fierce battle against the orc general outside of the building, doing her best to injure the mythic orc. Meanwhile, the orc general was utterly powerless to stop the beating. Although the orc general was a level 80 mythic-ranked creature, the Valkyrie was a level 85 mythic-ranked angel. There was a massive difference between the two beings' life ratings. The Valkyrie completely overpowered the orc general, and it took everything it had just to block the Valkyrie's attacks. Occasionally the orc general slipped up and the Valkyrie's attack sent it flying. The watching dark players were flabbergasted. The various commanders and upper echelons from the dark adventurer teams and dark guilds wiped the sweat from their foreheads. They inwardly celebrated the fact that they hadn't rushed to attack Shifeng. The consequences would have been unimaginably dire. By the time the Valkyrie disappeared, the orc general was heavily injured, greatly reducing its combat power. Now it was only slightly more powerful than the Grand Lord-ranked orc warriors. I need to hurry. When Shifeng saw the orc general attack the guards at the entrance, he began to inscribe runes faster. 46, 60 seconds. Once the orc general rejoined the fight, more NPC mercenaries began to fall. In just 60 seconds, over 10 Tier 2 NPCs had died. One of the Tier 3 NPCs had even sustained heavy injuries. When there were fewer than 30 NPC mercenaries remaining, the orc general used a powerful skill and charged past the blockade. Upon entering the fortress and spotting Shifeng, the orc general roared and swung its great sword at the offending swordsman. Suddenly, a cold energy beam shot toward Shifeng and everything it passed froze. While inscribing the magic array, Shifeng couldn't move without canceling the inscription process. He'd have to start all over again. Hence, Shifeng had no choice but to activate absolute defense. After the energy beam disappeared, everything except for Shifeng's immediate surroundings had frozen solid. When the orc general saw that Shifeng had survived, it was further enraged. It charged up to Shifeng, brandishing its greatsword. Despite the fact that the power of the orc general's attacks shattered the ground around him, Shifeng remained unharmed. However, his heart pounded with nervous energy rather than feeling relieved. Just when Absolute Domain's duration was about to end, the blue crystal in Shifeng's hand suddenly lit up, He had finally finished inscribing the magic array. Go! Shifeng shoved the crystal into the ground before him. As the crystal melded with the ground, a magic array appeared beneath Shifeng's feet. Seeing this, Shifeng activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his attributes skyrocketing. Scram! Shifeng yelled as he swung Killing Ray at the Orc General. Lightning slash! A blue lightning bolt struck the Orc General, and like a cannonball the creature flew backward, only stopping when it crashed into a nearby wall. Using this opportunity, Anna had her 10 rock guardians form a magic array around the Orc General, trapping the mythic orc. Meanwhile, Shifeng took out several small crystals for the magic array's finishing touches. Since Shifeng was now very familiar with the process, he only needed 10 seconds to complete the array. As the magic array completed, a blue ripple of light enveloped the war fortress. A moment later, a series of system notifications reached Shifeng's ears. Chapter 1828, Advanced Manager. System. Congratulations. You have completed the epic trade route quest Orc King's Ambitions. Rewarding Starmoon Kingdom reputation plus 100 plus 50% EXP of current level, and 1 Starmoon Kingdom airport building order. Orc Empire Region System Announcement. Congratulations to Zero Wing's Silverwing Town for becoming the first town in the Orc Empire to set up a trade route. Rewarding 10,000 popularity points to Silverwing Town and 1 transportation firm design. The system announcement echoed 3 times in the ears of every player within the Orc Empire. Set up a trade route? What's that? It should be something that can lure in more NPC merchants. If that's true, doesn't that mean we can obtain even more rare items from the NPCs of Silverwing Town now? Zero Wing is really amazing. Silverwing Town got promoted into an intermediate town just recently. Now Zero Wing has even managed to set up a trade route for it. The Orc Empire will definitely fall under Zero Wing's dominion in the future. That's for sure. Previously, the Evil Beast Army was already helpless against Zero Wing. With how rapidly Silverwing Town is developing right now, I believe it will surpass Ancient Rock City before long. It would be great if that's the case. If Silverwing Town really does surpass Ancient Rock City, we won't have to worry about getting ambushed by dark players when grinding in the Orc Empire's outer area. The players grinding in the Orc Empire promptly started a discussion about Zero Wing. They all held an optimistic view of Zero Wing's future. At the same time, they also hoped that Silverwing Town could develop quickly. For some reason, Ancient Rock City had actually become a mecca for the dark forces. A large number of dark players was currently gathered there. Since Ancient Rock City was located in the Orc Empire's inner area, the dark players' main sphere of activity encompassed the Orc Empire's inner area and the boundary between the inner and outer areas. As a result, the independent players trying to grind and do quests in these areas frequently came under attack from dark players. As for Silverwing Town, which was the town closest to Ancient Rock City, while it could be considered a mecca for normal players like themselves, as the town could accommodate only a very limited number of people, not that many players gathered around the town. Hence, the number of normal players operating within the vicinity of Silverwing Town was relatively low, far from enough to contend against the dark players operating around Ancient Rock City. However, if Silverwing Town were developed further, the number of players gathering at the town would also increase. The influx of normal players would naturally pose a deterrent to the dark players. At the very least, they would refrain from boldly launching attacks in large numbers. Although the news of Silverwing Town setting up a trade route brought joy to the independent players operating within the Orc Empire, somber expressions appeared on the faces of the various major powers' upper echelons when they received this piece of news. At this point in time, the number of players willing to operate within the Orc Empire had already peaked. In other words, the player population within the Orc Empire would no longer increase significantly like before. Meanwhile, the various major powers that had captured a town within the Orc Empire all needed to lure more players to their towns to develop their towns. However, if most of the players operating within the Empire were heading to Silverwing Town, how were these major powers supposed to develop their own guild towns? With this recent development, the Ancient Rock City you're managing is in for a tough time, Falling Fire, who held a crystalline crimson staff, said when he heard the latest system announcement. A grin appeared on his face as he turned to look at the level 55, Tier 2 berserker standing beside him. To begin with, we only joined hands with the dark players to use their strength to whittle down Zero Wing. This change will bring no loss to the evil god's temple, Wind Hunter said indifferently. Moreover, no matter how Zero Wing develops Silverwing Town, it is already too late. Don't you agree? Indeed. While Zero Wing's black flame is indeed very scary, unfortunately for him, a guild can't become strong just by relying on one person. At the end of the day, a war between guilds is decided by the financial strength and foundations both sides possess, Falling Fire said as he looked at the Crimson Flame Fortress, whose defensive magic array had already been shattered. We'll let Zero Wing maintain its arrogance for now. As long as we capture the Crimson Flame Fortress, Zero Wing's existence will be over. The Crimson Flame Fortress was one of the most important fortresses within the Orc Empire's inner area. It was also one of the relatively safe transport hubs in the Empire. Capturing the Crimson Flame Fortress would be equivalent to taking control of the majority of the players heading to the regional dungeon Orc capital city. The amount of coins and resources they could earn from the fortress would easily surpass that from ancient Rock City at its peak. At the same time, their control of the Crimson Flame Fortress would essentially allow them to bar Zero Wing from entering the Orc capital city. This would render all of Zero Wing's efforts in the Orc Empire useless. In the long run, their alliance would grow increasingly stronger in the Orc Empire, whereas Zero Wing would weaken. After accumulating sufficient strength, they could then capture Silverwing Town and destroy Zero Wing, permanently relegating the guild to history. Elsewhere, due to Shifeng completing the expulsion magic array, the Orc army trying to kill him was subjected to a powerful pressure from the magic array. Even the Orc general's reactions turned sluggish under the pressure, allowing the swordsman to evade the Orc general's attacks, albeit barely. Just as Shifeng was trying to think of a way to escape, a series of war cries suddenly came from outside the fortress. In the next moment, an army of NPCs suddenly appeared roughly 1,000 yards away from the fortress and charged toward it. Although there were only 1,000 NPCs in this army, they were all very high-leveled, at least level 100. In God's domain, level 50 was a major turning point. Likewise, level 100 was also a very important turning point. A level 100, Tier 2 NPC would make short work of a level 95 Great Lord. Meanwhile, among the NPCs galloping over, the weakest one was a level 100 Tier 2 NPC. Claude, the NPC leading the charge, was even a level 120 Tier 3 Knight Captain. Although Claude was only Tier 3, he was not in the same league as ordinary Tier 3 NPCs, because Claude was fully equipped in epic equipment. The silver spear he wielded was even a fragmented legendary weapon. His combat power was no doubt at the peak of Tier 3. He could even go toe-to-toe with ordinary Tier 4 mythic monsters. Shortly after these NPCs appeared, they quickly engaged the Orc army in battle. Riding atop a one-horned beast, Claude swung his spear at the Orc warriors that were trying to force their way through the entrance. Claude's spear transformed into a silver streak of light, tearing a hole through space as it swept at the Orc warriors. 2 level 80 Grand Lord-ranked Orc warriors went flying. Meanwhile, the Lord-ranked Orcs which were caught in the crossfire were killed on the spot. In the blink of an eye, Claude cut open a path in the Orc army and charged straight into the fortress. Reinforcements? Shifeng was both joyful and confused at Claude's appearance. He had never thought that the system would provide such a service after he completed his quest. In the eyes of a level 120 Tier 3 NPC, the level 80 mythic ranked Orc general was no different from a common monster with a lot of HP. Claude sent the Orc general flying with every one of his attacks. As Claude and the Orc general clashed, the Orc general's HP continuously decreased. When the Orc general's HP fell to 50%, the mythic Orc let loose a frustrated and indignant roar. In the next moment, the battling Orc army started retreating. As for the Orc general, it too backed up to the top of a fortress wall, then jumped off and escaped. After the Orc army fled, Claude approached Shifeng. Lord Protector, thanks to your efforts, we were able to set up this important trade route. From now onward, Star Moon Kingdom's army will be managing this place to assure the trade route's security. Meanwhile, as you are the pioneer of this trade route, are you willing to pay 60,000 gold to repair this secret stone fortress and become its advanced manager? Chapter 1829. Secret Stone Fortress. Advanced Manager? Shifeng was ecstatic upon hearing Claude's words. In God's domain, becoming a fortress town's manager was akin to becoming a noble of an NPC town or city. Players would gain the authority to manage a portion of the shops in the fortress town and would be able to determine its development direction. However, an NPC fortress town wouldn't have only one manager. Just like Thunder Island, there could be multiple managers overseeing a single fortress town. An advanced manager possessed more authority than a basic manager. An advanced manager was close to being the deputy mayor of a fortress town. They would be able to manage important establishments such as the auction house, teleportation hall, and adventurers association, not just a bunch of shops. Although becoming an advanced manager was inferior to fully occupying a fortress town, since an NPC fortress town would be partially operated and guarded by NPCs, barring special situations, it was much safer than a guild fortress town. For example, currently, so long as the Secret Stone Fortress was being garrisoned by level 100 NPCs, even if Beast Emperor sent his entire evil beast army over, he wouldn't be able to take down the fortress. Unless Beast Emperor had some way to reduce the garrisoned NPCs' levels, capturing the fortress would be impossible. Lord Claude, must the 60,000 gold be paid right now? Shifeng asked. 60,000 gold was no small sum. This was especially true for Shifeng right now, as he had already spent most of his funds on this expedition. 60,000 gold is indeed a lot of money. Moreover, it'll take some time to get the necessary materials to repair the Secret Stone Fortress, Claude said, nodding. It'll take 4 days at the quickest for the kingdom's army to arrive. It is fine so long as you gather the 60,000 gold within these 4 days. System: you have triggered the quest Secret Stone Fortress. Collect 60,000 gold within 4 days. Failure to do so will result in the loss of the opportunity to become Secret Stone Fortress's advanced manager. Wonderful. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief upon seeing the system notification. While it might be difficult for ordinary first-rate guilds to collect 60,000 gold in 4 days, some might even have to sell some of their lands to do so. This was not a problem for Shifeng. After all, he had a business deal with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul. Both these super first-rate guilds had shown great interest in the Dark Corrosion set. They had also placed an order for a large number of all-round devices and elven silver. If he offered to let the two guilds pay for a portion of the all-round devices and elven silver using coins, instead of magic crystals, the two guilds would definitely be more than happy to do so. After Shifeng was done speaking with Claude, he immediately left for Silverwing Town. While collecting 60,000 gold in 4 days posed no problem, the money he needed amounted to far more than just 60,000 gold. After completing the Orc King's Ambitions quest, he had acquired the extremely precious Star Moon Kingdom Airport building order as well as a transportation firm design. Both these items were priceless treasures. The Star Moon Kingdom Airport building order was akin to a permit to open up an air route. However, he would need a lot of funds to build an airport. Fortunately, the construction of the airport did not require a design, only money. Even so, building a small airport still cost 50,000 gold. However, once he set up an air route from Star Moon Kingdom to Silverwing Town, not only would it expedite the transport of NPC merchants' goods, but players from Star Moon Kingdom would also have an easier time getting to Silverwing Town. Although air travel wasn't as fast as teleportation, it was still many times faster than traveling on land on a mount. Moreover, the transportation fee one had to pay was also much cheaper than that for a teleportation array. In the past, a large part of the reason why many superpowers were able to develop their neutral towns into an advanced city was their possession of an airport. Chapter 1830: Shocking Retreat. Hearing the words of the assassin, the other players belonging to the same Dark Adventurer team started looking around curiously. Just like the assassin had said, their adventurer team wasn't the only one taking action. The members of the 24 or so other adventurer teams and several dark guilds around them had also started sneaking closer to Shifeng. It was obvious that these dark adventurer teams and dark guilds were growing impatient. In God's domain, the dark forces were constantly oppressed. During the early stages of the game, players belonging to the dark forces had a much more difficult time getting by than normal players. After all, the dark forces were still incapable of contending against the various kingdoms and empires right now. Meanwhile, dark adventurer teams and dark guilds with the potential to become a superpower were extremely rare. The conditions to join one such power were extremely stringent. Powers like Dark Soul, which was as strong as a superpower and also offered its members the freedom of an adventurer team, were even rarer. Joining Dark Soul would definitely bring plenty of benefits to their future development. They also wouldn't have to worry about getting hunted just because they killed the members of certain guilds. Moreover, they could grind in the high-resource maps occupied by Dark Soul and not make do in poor maps. Commander. The assassin could not help but call out to the silent Tier 2 ranger once again. If we don't make a move now, I'm afraid we'll lose this chance to the other adventurer teams. Fine. In for a penny, in for a pound. Even if we fail, at worst we'll lose a level. If we succeed, we'll become members of Dark Soul in the future and instantly join the upper ranks of the Dark Forces. The gruff man carrying an exquisite crystalline longbow said, nodding. A hint of killing intent flashed across his eyes as he looked at Shifeng. Dark players had a much more difficult time getting by than normal players. The difficulty of finding a strong support to rely on as a dark player was also much greater than what normal players faced when trying to join the various superpowers. Now that there was an opportunity to join Dark Soul, how could he possibly let this chance get away? When the 24 or so members of the adventurer team heard their commander's words, they immediately revealed fierce expressions. They then followed their commander and slowly inched their way toward Shifeng. At this moment, aside from this one adventurer team, the several thousand other dark players hiding in the forest were also entering a combat-ready state. Some stealthed assassins had even gotten within 200 yards of Shifeng already. Black Flame has many means of escaping. We must not let him get away from us. First, form an encirclement around him. Then use war bondage to trap him here. Once the battle starts, use your silencing skills on him right away. We must finish him in the first exchange. A level 54, Tier 2 assassin clad in dark gray robes said to the 30+ assassins around him through the team chat. As long as we kill Black Flame, everyone in our Poison Blade Guild will get to join Dark Soul. Then we'll be able to live like kings in the Dark Knight Empire. We won't need to fear even super first-rate guilds. When their leader said that, the eyes of the 30+ level 53 and level 54 assassins glowed with excitement. Their guild, Poison Blade, was a relatively ordinary dark guild in the Dark Knight Empire. Normally they could fight only second and third-rate guilds. When facing first-rate guilds they had no choice but to run away. As for super first-rate guilds, these existences were no different from gods to them. Let alone provoking one, they didn't even dare to come into contact with one. When they thought about how they wouldn't need to fear Crimson Emperor and Unyielding Soul after joining Dark Soul, they could not help but feel excited. As they entertained visions of such a future, their footsteps as they approached Shifeng became much lighter than before. Their auras also became gentler. At this moment, one could say that their focus had reached unprecedented levels. Only Shifeng existed in their eyes right now. 150 yards. 100 yards. 80 yards. As these assassins closed in on Shifeng's rear, they also grew increasingly nervous. When the assassins were within 50 yards of Shifeng, a low voice suddenly entered everyone's ears and echoed loudly in everyone's mind. Scram. Before anyone could react, Shifeng abruptly turned around and unsheathed Killing Ray. He then swung the sacred sword at the air before him. Suddenly, countless arcs of lightning formed before Shifeng and joined together to form a blue river. Like a primordial beast, the blue river of lightning scorched everything in its path, spreading out in a cone covering an 80-yard radius. Before the stealthed assassins could even react, countless arcs of lightning had already devoured their bodies. After a brief moment of exposure, the assassins' bodies then transformed into streaks of light and disappeared from the area. As the lightning river gradually dissipated, the other dark players who were still a distance away could not help but gasp. In just one hit, Shifeng had killed over 70 stealthed assassins. Right now, numerous pieces of shiny equipment littered the scorched ground. Meanwhile, due to Shifeng's sudden attack, the footsteps and breathing of the other stealthed assassins turned chaotic, their bodies becoming exposed to everyone. This is the Sword King's strength? A Tier 2 assassin wearing dark gray leather armor gulped in fear as he looked at the scorched ground that was just a few centimeters beside him. Compared to the players hiding in the distance, he had managed to get a much clearer view of Shifeng's attack just now. From the moment Shifeng started activating a skill until the time the skill had fully activated, he, a Tier 2 assassin, had actually failed to react by the time he realized Shifeng had attacked. The blue river was already shooting out from Shifeng's sword. Moreover, despite him being able to clearly see the approach of the blue river, his body had been unable to react at all. This situation was just too frightening. His mind could not process how Shifeng had executed such an attack. An ordinary expert player might not understand the implications of such a situation, but he did. The requirement for activating a life-saving skill was for players to think the skill's name. Only after doing so would the life-saving skill activate. However, if one could attack a player before the said player could have such a thought in their mind, then even having the most powerful life-saving skill in the game would be meaningless. In other words, Shifeng could kill an assassin, the class that was famed for having the most life-saving skills, in one attack whenever he wanted. This discovery instantly crushed any thoughts the assassin in dark gray leather armor had of fighting Shifeng. In reality, though, Shifeng's inconceivable attack wasn't entirely impossible to block, especially for experts who understood the principles of the Realms of Truth. This was because the move Shifeng had just executed applied the Realms of Truth's basics, moving the body before moving the mind. Unless one trained arduously to go up against attacks executed using such quick reaction speeds, reacting to such an attack was simply impossible. After executing Lightning Edge, Shifeng took a look at everyone present. Upon seeing no new challengers moving up to him, he sheathed Killing Ray before turning around and leaving. Due to Shifeng's attack, the remaining 100+ assassins no longer dared to approach him. They simply stood still as they watched him leave the battlefield. Guild leader Black Flame is leaving. Are we still not moving? A level 54 Tier 2 shield warrior could not help but ask as he looked at the level 54 Tier 2 ranger beside him. You want to go? Be my guest, the Tier 2 ranger said, rolling his eyes at the shield warrior. The Tier 2 shield warrior shrank his neck back instinctively and shook his head. The fact that he was able to get promoted to Tier 2 at this stage of the game proved that his combat standard was much better than ordinary experts. However, Black Flame's attack inspired dread even in him. He definitely wasn't confident of blocking the attack Black Flame executed just now. Meanwhile, even after Shifeng's figure disappeared from the battlefield, the thousands of dark players remained standing quietly at their original positions with pale expressions. Some independent players that were passing by the area were stupefied when they saw this scene. Too strong. With just one attack, Shifeng had deterred several thousand dark players from making a move. By the time the dark players retreated from the area, news about the battle had already been spread like mad on the official forums by the independent players. Chapter 1831, or Empire's Number 1 Swordsman or Empire, Silverwing Town. After Shifeng shook off the dark players' pursuit, he immediately returned to Zero Wing's residence in Silverwing Town to make arrangements for the transport and purchase of products from NPC merchants. Although he had already set up the trade route, the collection of usage fees from the NPCs who used the trade route would have to be carried out by both players and NPC soldiers. In addition, players would need to be present in person to purchase the goods that were meant to be sold to NPCs. Hence, he would need to assign considerable manpower to handle these tasks. Moreover, in order to make sure the items purchased were useful, he would have to send knowledgeable personnel to deal with the NPC merchants. However, as soon as Shifeng returned to the guild residence, he was greeted by a boisterous scene. Currently, guild members were chatting happily and excitedly with each other inside the guild hall. Guild leader, you're back. Everyone is talking about you right now, Aqua Rose said, excitement sprouting in her heart when she saw Shifeng. Because of your performance over at the Secret Stone Fortress, many people have already started titling you as the Empire's number 1 swordsman. Of course, there are some who object to this. They feel that you are unworthy of this title and will accept it only when they have actually fought you. Even so, due to this situation, many more players from the neighboring kingdoms are trying to join Zero Wing now. In addition, several well-known experts from the neighboring kingdoms want to challenge you. However, Fire Dance has accepted these challenges in your place and is currently fighting these experts in the battle arena right now. Well-known experts from other kingdoms are challenging me? Shifeng could not help but smile upon hearing this. This is a good opportunity. He had never thought that his battle over at the secret stone fortress would spark such a development. Before today he had received many challenges from experts before. However, back then these had been limited to the experts of Starmoon Kingdom. Now, however, even the experts of other kingdoms were challenging him. This proved that his fame had already reached a considerable degree in those kingdoms. Otherwise, the well-known experts of those kingdoms wouldn't have come to challenge him. Meanwhile, the fact that these experts had come to challenge him was a good thing for Silverwing Town. Aqua, from today onwards, set up a challenge arena in the battle arena specifically for people wishing to challenge me. However, they cannot just issue a challenge without restrictions. Before I accept their challenge, they'll have to win 10 consecutive matches against people of our choosing. For now, select our fighters from our main force members. The challengers have to pay 5 gold for each match. If the challengers win, they'll get 20 gold in return, Shifeng said. I understand, Aqua Rose replied, her eyes glowing. With Shifeng's plan, they could not only increase the popularity of Silverwing Town's battle arena but also earn a lot of money and train the main force members, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Following which, Shifeng turned to Melancholic Smile, who stood beside Aqua Rose, and asked, Melancholic, how is the production of the all-round devices and elven silver coming along? Before he embarked on his quest to set up a trade route, he had left matters regarding the all-round devices and elven silver to Melancholic Smile to handle. The all-round device was an item he personally created. Hence he could make as many copies of its design as he wanted. The only reason he had not bothered trying to mass-produce the all-round device until now was the much lower success rate other people would have when producing the all-round device compared to him, the creator. In addition, the production costs for the all-round device were also extremely high. However, now that everyone's forging techniques had improved, it wasn't entirely impossible to mass-produce the all-rounded device. Currently, only I have a feasible success rate when producing the all-round device. Hence, I am the only one producing it right now. I have already made 53 all-round devices. I am still far from fulfilling the 200 pieces you requested. However, Coco has become a master forger in Titan City. If we include her help, I believe it'll take only 1 more day for us to get the required 200 pieces. As for the elven silver, we already have over 200 bottles produced. We can deliver them to you at any time, Melancholic Smile reported joyfully. Coco has already been promoted into a master forger? Shifeng was overjoyed at this piece of news. A master lifestyle player would be welcomed by any major power, not to mention a master of the forger subclass, which was one of the 3 most popular subclasses. Now that Cream Coco had already become a master forger, the Candlelight trading firm's forging standards would also improve. Although Candlelight had 2 master forgers as he was a guild leader, he was always busy with one thing or another. He simply could not afford to stay cooped up producing items. Likewise, Melancholic Smile had to manage the Candlelight trading firm. The time she could spend producing items was also very limited. However, Cream Coco was different. She did not have to manage any personnel or deal with guild affairs. She could focus fully on forging. Guild leader, this isn't everything. While you were away doing your quest, the people from the Ice Crystal world sent over another large batch of materials. Save for some of the specialty materials, I split the other materials into batches and had them brought to other kingdoms and empires to be sold. I also reserved a portion for our own use. After deducting our purchasing costs and the cost of the products brought over to the Ice Crystal world, we netted over 53,000 gold from this batch of materials, Melancholic Smile said. That much? Shifeng was a little surprised when he heard Melancholic Smile's report. While it had been several days since he returned from the Ice Crystal world, he had emptied the market of all the rare materials he could find in the 2 NPC cities before leaving. He had never imagined that the players there would refill the market with materials so quickly. He had to admit that the wealth earned by selling the rare materials obtained from other worlds was truly amazing. Of course, a large part of the success this time was due to the Azura Adventurer Team and Adventurer Alliance. Without these 2 organizations, Collecting so many rare materials from the ice crystal world wouldn't have been possible. Meanwhile, they had already generated such massive wealth despite occupying only 2 NPC cities. If they could occupy the entire ice crystal world, the wealth they could generate would be many times more than even what the secret pavilion's magic crystal vein could provide. It was no wonder the various superpowers fought heavily over otherworlds during his previous life. Back then, the intense competition for otherworlds didn't allow second- and third-rate guilds to poke a hand into the competition. Even first-rate guilds could only fight for the scraps left behind by the various superpowers. "Alright, I got it." After pondering for some time, Shifeng turned to Aqua Rose and said, "Aqua, contact Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart and tell them that we'll have their items ready by tomorrow. If they are lacking in magic crystals, they can pay a portion of the bill using coins." "I'll notify them right away." Aqua Rose nodded. After Shifeng was done dealing with these matters, he promptly headed to Silverwing Town's advanced smithy. Currently, the advanced smithy was overcrowded with players. The majority of these players were here to disassemble their obsolete weapons and equipment, after which they would use the materials they obtained to order custom-made weapons and equipment. Whenever these players used the services offered by the advanced smithy, 10% of the total bill would go into Zero Wings coffers. Chapter 1832, 3 Great Trading Firms. System. Congratulations. You are the first player to have constructed a transportation firm. Rewarding 1 silver Twin Lions trading firm token. The system announcement repeated 3 times, the system's emotionless voice echoing in Shifeng's ears. Upon hearing these words, Shifeng fell into a daze that lasted for a long time. A silver Twin Lions token? Shifeng stared in shock at the silver token in his hand. Carved on this circular silver token was the image of 2 lions. There were also golden divine runes etched along its rim. It radiated an extremely ancient aura, obviously having existed for a very long time. "Lord Protector, congratulations on obtaining this Twin Lions trading firm token. You are now a silver VIP of the Twin Lions trading firm, one of God's Domain's 3 most ancient trading firms. It is very difficult to become one of the trading firm's VIPs. This token will be of great help to you when you are doing business or transporting goods. Lord Protector, please make sure to keep the token secure. You will not be given a new one if you lose it," the NPC senior administrator explained. However, at this point, Shifeng wasn't even listening to the NPC's explanation anymore. After all, he had a clearer understanding of the value of the Twin Lions trading firm's token than even the NPC administrator, having long familiarity with the ability and influence of the trading firm. The Twin Lions trading firm was one of the oldest trading firms extant in God's domain. Its origins were unknown. However, rumor had it that the Twin Lions trading firm had a hand in the establishment of the famous War God's Temple. Although the Twin Lions trading firm currently did not possess as extensive an influence as the War God's Temple, whose influence spanned the entire continent of God's domain, it was still more influential than an ordinary empire. Only the 4 great empires of God's domain could possibly rival the trading firm in influence. Meanwhile, to guilds, the Twin Lions trading firm was much more important than even the 4 great empires. In fact, the trading firm's importance to guilds surpassed the War God's temples. This distinction was because the Twin Lions trading firm's trade routes covered over half of the entire continent. Anyone ferrying non-bag space items would prefer to use the trade routes of the trading firm, as these were much safer than the trade routes operated by players. Aside from the greater danger, player-operated trade routes were far less efficient. By using the Twin Lions trading firm's trade routes, one could save more than half the travel time they would normally need when using a player-operated trade route. However, getting to utilize the Twin Lions trading firm's trade routes was not an easy task. One had to be a member of the Twin Lions trading firm. In other words, they needed to obtain one of the trading firm's tokens. Only then could they transport goods through the trading firm's trade routes. Hence, the various large guilds and merchant players in the past all sought to join the Twin Lions trading firm. Of course, the benefits and treatment one received depended on one's status in the Twin Lions trading firm. VIPs not only got more discounts but also had access to trade routes that were normally not open to lower-ranking members. This was especially true for trade routes in neutral maps. In addition, higher-ranking members also had the privilege of hiring NPC escorts from the Twin Lions trading firm. For example, in the past, due to Shadow's low ranking in the Twin Lions trading firm, Shifeng had no choice but to lead the guild's delivery runs himself. As a result, they frequently came under attack from NPC bandits. Had Shadow's ranking been enough in the Twin Lions trading firm to hire NPC escorts to serve as a deterrence, the guild's caravans wouldn't have come under attack so frequently. One could easily imagine the difficulty of acquiring a common token. In addition, the Twin Lions trading firm acknowledged only the token and not its owner. There was no way to upgrade a token's rank. The number of tokens distributed also had a limit, and the tokens would all drop upon death. Hence, many players and powers had sought to steal the tokens in the past. From what Shifeng knew, there were only 99 common tokens, 49 bronze tokens, 24 silver tokens and 12 golden tokens in the game at any time. As for the Elder token, he had never heard any information about it. However, he expected it to be limited to 10. With the billions of players in God's domain, this small number of tokens simply wasn't enough to satisfy the demand. Hence, every token was extremely valuable regardless of its rank. In the past, Shifeng had managed to get his hands on a common token only by a stroke of good luck. He had never dreamed of obtaining a silver token in this life. With this, transporting important items across neutral maps will no longer be a problem. Looking at the Twin Lions token, Shifeng cooked up many new plans. Non-bag space items were always worth a fortune. This was especially true for specialty products that were unique to a certain area. The main reason for their high value was the high cost of transporting them. However, many items important to players generally required the use of these materials. Moreover, as players reached higher levels, the development of guild towns and cities would also start to require more and more non-bag space items. In addition, some special weapons and tools would necessitate the use of non-bag space items. Hence, the Twin Lions trading firm had been extremely popular among the various large guilds and merchant players. Now that Shifeng had a silver token, he would have no problem traveling across many neutral maps. He could also use these specialty non-bag space items to make a fortune. In addition, the Twin Lions trading firm would hold an auction once a month. The standard of this auction far surpassed any auction hosted by players and empires. One could say that the Twin Lions trading firm's auction was the highest standard auction in the entire God's domain. In the past, even legendary items had appeared in the auction, as well as fragmented legendary items in significant quantities. As for epic items, they were no different from commonplace items in the auction. In the past, every Twin Lions trading firm auction was a time for the various large guilds to increase their combat power. However, participating in the auction was not easy. At the very minimum, one needed to possess a common token. Depending on the rank of one's token, the number of people one could bring into the auction would differ. The common token allowed only one person entry into the auction venue, whereas the bronze token allowed 2 people, the silver token allowed 3 and the gold token allowed 5. As for the Elder token, as nobody had ever obtained one even after 10 years had passed in God's domain, nobody knew how many people the token allowed entry to. It seems I can have Aqua start tasking some people with transporting the diamond would we have stockpiled to the Apocalypse Empire's shipyard. Shifeng smiled as he looked at the silver token. Previously, as he had been worried about having insufficient strength to protect the shipment, he had not bothered transporting the diamond would they collected. Now that he had a silver token, he could borrow the Twin Lions trading firm's power. By spending a little money, he could easily send the stockpile of diamond wood over to the Apocalypse Empire. Although he didn't have a bronze speedboat design right now, using diamond wood to construct advanced speedboats would still increase the attributes of the speedboat somewhat. Afterward, Shifeng contacted Aqua Rose and had her dispatch some guild experts to make the necessary preparations. As for himself, he returned to the Candlelight trading firm and started producing all-round devices. Although Cream Cocoa and Melancholic Smile could indeed produce enough all-round devices for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul, he was also in dire need of the all-round devices himself as he planned to head to the Flame Demon's Valley and activate the World Gate as soon as possible. Only with the help of the Philosopher's Hand could he increase the development speed of Candlelight's lifestyle players. The production of ships required a large number of master engineers, not to mention the production of the hell chariots and guardian puppets. Having just 2 or 3 master engineers simply wasn't enough. Meanwhile, over at Silverwing Town, the transportation firm's construction was just completed. The sudden appearance of the 3-story stadium-sized building immediately caused a commotion among the players in the town. Chapter 1833, Gathering at Silverwing Town. The 3-story tall transportation firm was located close to Silverwing Town's main entrance. Meanwhile, 10 level 100 NPC guards stood before the entrance, one of which was a Tier 3 guard captain. The guard captain carried a great sword on his back and wore silver armor. Due to the strict atmosphere around him, players kept a wary distance from the transportation firm, only daring to glance at the building from far away. However, although players did not dare approach the building, one NPC merchant after another nonchalantly entered the firm. Large caravans also moved their goods into the building on a regular basis. After several minutes, the stadium-sized building was crowded with carriages and NPCs. Many players mustered their courage and entered the building after such a lively scene. Amazing! There are so many NPC merchants here. Upon entering the transportation firm's first-floor hall, the curious players immediately spotted many NPC merchants lined up at the front counter, handling some formalities. There were easily over 1,000 NPC merchants in the building, some of which had set up stalls in front of their parked carriages, selling a variety of precious items. The scene was simply dazzling. Meanwhile, the most eye-catching thing in the transportation firm had to be the gigantic crystal hovering in the center of the hall. The crystal displayed the transportation quests available today and their corresponding rewards. The quest difficulty and requirements were also listed. Players' jaws dropped after they inspected the colossal translucent crystal in the hall. Delivery to Bronze Teeth Town. Difficulty 2-star. Requirement, Tier 2, must have completed 5 1-star quests. Remuneration, 3 gold, 300 contribution points and 1 void magic gold. Recruiting 6 people. Delivery to Bronze Teeth Town. Difficulty 1-star. Requirement, level 50 or above. Remuneration, 80 silver, 50 contribution points and 1 smart armor kit. Recruiting 10 people. Every quest offered tempting rewards. Many expert players drooled over the 2-star quests in particular. At this stage of the game, many expert players wouldn't earn 3 gold even after a full day of grinding. Although the reward items might not be as valuable as the gold, they were also highly sought after. For example, void magic gold could be used to increase a weapon's sharpness and lower its durability consumption. However, void magic gold wasn't normally sold on the market. To the expert players present, the void magic gold was far more valuable than 3 gold coins. Naturally, the 3-star quest rewards even tempted players from the various major powers. 3-star quests actually awarded rare Tier 2 skill books upon completion. Even the various major powers experts lacked Tier 2 skills. Aside from purchasing such skills with legacy points, players could only obtain them by farming monsters for skill books. However, even the drop rate for Tier 1 skill books was extremely low, not to mention Tier 2 skill books. After everyone finished gawking at the quests on the giant crystal, they noticed an exchange counter. This exchange counter allowed players to spend the contribution points and coins they earned to purchase rare items the NPC merchants sold. The available rare items were impossible to purchase elsewhere. In fact, the NPC merchants even had epic items for sale. Upon seeing these items, the players in the hall immediately went into an uproar. Quick! Notify the guild leader. We must get those epic items before the other guilds. The members of the various major powers immediately contacted their respective guilds' upper echelons and notified them about the transportation firm. As for the independent players present inside the transportation firm, their eyes glowed with excitement upon seeing the item list. Epic items. Independent players only dreamed of obtaining such items, yet as long as they earned enough coins and contribution points, they could purchase these items. In other words, they now had the possibility of acquiring an epic item. For a time, news of the transportation firms spread like a plague throughout the Or Empire and the neighboring countries. We can purchase epic items just by collecting enough contribution points from quests? There's no status restriction. Liang Jing was even more confused upon noticing players' reactions. Chapter 1834, Frightening Zero Wing. Looking at the woman approaching her, Liang Jing could feel the weight of the surrounding players' gazes. The long line of players waiting to enter the candlelight trading firm turned to look at her as well. If these people were focused on the woman approaching her, she could more or less understand their reactions. After all, the woman before her was tall and elegant, with a face and temperament to match. It was only natural that such a graceful woman would attract attention. But these players were focused on her, not this woman. A moment ago, these people had ignored her, yet she had instantly become a sensation the moment this beautiful young woman had called out to her. The beauty greeting Liang Jing was none other than Melancholic Smile. According to Shifeng, he had found her a capable assistant, although her guild leader had asked that she show Liang Jing the ropes first. "Hello, I am Melancholic Smile. I will be helping you learn about the candlelight trading firm and all there is to know about our business. If there is anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me," Melancholic Smile introduced herself. After Melancholic Smile's introduction, the nearby players went into an uproar. "Crap. Who is that woman?" Melancholic Smile actually came out to greet her. Could she be some sort of master lifestyle player? That can't be it. She's only level 10 and she isn't wearing a lifestyle insignia. She's definitely a newbie, but she must be someone important if Melancholic came to welcome her personally. Maybe she is the heiress of some major corporation, here to visit the candlelight trading firm? For a time, the lifestyle players seeking to join the candlelight trading firm quietly discussed Liang Jing's identity, glancing at the woman with envy and admiration. Not only was Melancholic Smile the candlelight trading firm's manager, but she was also a master forger. She was one of Zero Wing's core upper echelons. Rumors had it that many superpowers and major corporations had even offered astronomical prices to hire her, but she had rejected them all. Melancholic Smile was an idol to lifestyle players like them. Not only was she very beautiful, but her forging standards also ranked at the apex of God's domain. They all dreamed of a life like the one Melancholic Smile enjoyed. That was also the reason that so many lifestyle players had come from neighboring kingdoms to join Candlelight. Meanwhile, overhearing the nearby lifestyle players' discussions, Liang Jing was inwardly shocked as she examined the player before her. She never thought that this woman held such a high position. She also blushed with embarrassment as she heard the players guess her identity. The heiress of a major corporation? She was only the assistant of the Big Dipper Group's chairman. She was insignificant compared to an heiress. After Melancholic Smile and Liang Jing introduced themselves, they entered the candlelight trading firm. White River City's candlelight trading firm was the sole 3-star shop in Star Moon Kingdom. When Liang Jing entered the building, she felt as if she had stepped into a modern shopping mall. Only the shop had magical elements unlike a mall in the real world. Customers crowded the first-floor hall, stupefying Liang Jing. She hadn't imagined that a shop in God's domain could be so lively. Melancholic Smile simply smiled at Liang Jing's reaction before leading the new recruit to the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor and up were not open to the public. Only Candlelight's members had access. Currently, the Candlelight trading firm has over 20,000 lifestyle players. They're split across multiple branches. Among them, over 4,000 have officially signed a contract to become internal members. You could say that Candlelight is the bona fide #1 trading firm throughout Star Moon Kingdom. This shop alone houses a little over 2,000 lifestyle players. In the future, you will manage this shop and its employees, Melancholic Smile explained as she gestured to the various workshops, which contained Candlelight's lifestyle players hard at work. Although you won't have to manage a lot of people at first, once you get used to the job and perform well, I'll have you take over managing Silverwing Town. Things are getting hectic in Silverwing right now. We just increased the entry limit to 1,800,000 people. We'll have to increase this number slowly in the future, so we have a lot to do. As Liang Jing listened to Melancholic Smile's explanation, she wondered if she had heard wrong. Candlelight had over 20,000 employees. Moreover, over 4,000 were officially contracted to the trading firm. In other words, there were over 4,000 players working as full-time employees for Candlelight. This was several times more than the Big Dipper Group's employees. Later, she'd even have to manage a town with 1,800,000 players. This was simply madness. If the situation was as Melancholic Smile had described, as the assistant of the Big Dipper Group's chairman, she was certain that Zero Wing was far wealthier than the Big Dipper Group. There was simply no comparing the two. She had always wondered why Shifeng acted so nonchalantly towards the Big Dipper Dojo's offers. It had offered a salary and benefits that countless people dreamed of, yet Shifeng had settled for a temporary position, focusing his efforts on God's domain. Now she finally understood. It turned out that the Big Dipper Group's offers, which it had deemed quite generous, were little more than a farce to Shifeng. He had only been working for the Big Dipper as a pastime. Meanwhile, Shifeng had offered her a position with Zero Wing in God's domain because he had appreciated her management skills, and Xiaoyu wanted to use the opportunity to learn more about Shifeng's affairs. Whether she chose to work for the Big Dipper Group or Zero Wing Workshop in the future would be up to her. However, right now she had no idea how she was supposed to report her discoveries to Chairman Xiao. What Liang Jing did not know was that Silverwing Town wasn't Zero Wing's most populated territory. Rather, Starmoon Kingdom's Zero Wing City saw far more traffic with a player population several times higher than Silverwing Town. Elsewhere, Shifeng, ignorant of Liang Jing's thoughts, still focused on forging all-round devices. Finally, after a full day of work, he had crafted over 100 all-round devices. He had also made quite a few standard level 50 fine gold and dark gold weapons. Thanks to all the EXP from forging, he had finally reached level 68. Although he had killed plenty of monsters when setting up the trade route, due to the NPC's participation, the EXP reward had been significantly reduced. He had only received a lot of EXP after he completed the quest. Even so, it hadn't been enough to push him to level 68. However, compared to his recent level up, the Philosopher's Hand's ability truly surprised Shifeng. When he used the Philosopher's Soul to help guide him in forging level 50 fine gold and dark gold weapons, the designs he had obtained from Titan City, the finished products had ranged between level 50 and 55. It was a massive improvement. Although a standardized level 55 fine gold weapon was slightly weaker than level 55 fine gold equipment acquired from monsters, it was still considerably stronger than a level 50 fine gold weapon. This was also the case for standardized level 55 dark gold weapons. The highest leveled players in the various large guilds were currently level 55. Hence, trying to acquire level 55 weapons was extremely difficult. Currently, most of these level 55 experts still use level 50 fine gold weapons. Given the choice, these experts would definitely wield a standardized level 55 dark gold weapon. If he sold these standardized dark gold weapons in bulk, he could fetch a higher price than normal. Suddenly, Melancholic Smile contacted Shifeng and reported, "Guild leader, the representatives from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul have arrived. They're waiting in the second-floor VIP reception room." "Alright, I'll head over now." Nodding, Shifeng collected his forged items and headed to the reception room. Unyielding Soul needs all-rounded devices and elven silver more than anything right now. It can't afford to back out this deal. Blue Phoenix saw the reasoning in her pavilion master's words. The more hostile a map's environment was, the more treasures it would have to offer. Take the Sea of Death, for example. After exploring the sea zone's dangerous islands, the various superpowers had acquired a significant harvest now. All of the various superpowers were organizing large, powerful teams to explore the Sea of Death. However, to explore the map's islands effectively, the superpowers would need items that could reduce the hostile environment's impact on their players. While acquiring a small number of such items was not a problem, acquiring them in bulk was almost impossible. If they could get their hands on the all-round devices and elven silver, even if they didn't use the items for themselves, they could earn impressive profits by reselling them. While both guilds' representatives quietly talked among themselves, the reception room's door swung open. Following which, a cloaked, middle-aged man entered the room, and the occupants fell silent when they saw him. "He's Black Flame." Mu Lingsha was shocked when she looked at the new arrival. What a powerful aura. Shi Feng radiated an extremely strong violent aura. In Mu Lingsha's eyes, Shi Feng felt like a primordial beast rather than a player. What Mu Lingsha did not know was that the aura didn't belong to Shi Feng. Instead, it radiated from the abyssal blade at his waist. The abyssal blade's aura could no longer be contained after Shi Feng had upgraded it to level 50. Because of this, Shi Feng had chosen to appear as Black Flame for this meeting. Sorry for the long wait, I had some business to deal with, Shi Feng apologized. It's fine. We just arrived as well, Unyielding Heart said, chuckling. Moreover, if it means we can obtain the all-round devices and elven silver, even a several-hour wait would be worth it. Phoenix Rain, who sat close to Unyielding Heart, could not help but smile when she heard the man's words. She hadn't expected Unyielding Heart to be so direct about his desire for the items. All right, since everyone is here for these two, let's get straight to business, Shi Feng said. He then took out the all-round devices and elven silver he had prepared and placed them on the table before him. After working around the clock with my people, we forged a total of 400 all-round devices and 450 bottles of elven silver. According to our previous agreement, 200 of each item will go to the Phoenix Pavilion Master, while 100 of each item are reserved for Brother Heart. As for the 5,000 magic crystals we agreed on before, we'll just forget about that. I'd like to sell the remaining 100 all-round devices and 150 bottles of elven silver via a private auction. You may bid for these extras with coins. May I know your opinions about this arrangement? All right. I have no problems with that. Upon hearing that Shi Feng had so many extra items, Phoenix Rain could not help but inwardly celebrate. I don't have any arguments either. Unyielding Heart nodded in agreement. Only he slightly regretted his previous decision. Had he known Zero Wing was capable of producing so many all-round devices and elven silver, he would have ordered more. However, when he considered his uncertainty about how useful the elven silver would be against the Silent Water, he dismissed his regret. Hearing the two players' agreement, Shi Feng proceeded with fulfilling their previous arrangements. In the end, Shi Feng received 80,000 magic crystals from Phoenix Rain and 40,000 magic crystals from Unyielding Heart. He then allowed both to bid for the additional all-round devices and elven silver, auctioning the items off in batches of 10. As the transaction could be completed using coins, both guilds bid on the items without issues. In the end, Phoenix Rain had purchased 80 all-round devices and 120 bottles of elven silver, while Unyielding Heart bought the rest. When comparing foundations, Unyielding Soul was definitely superior to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, Unyielding Soul didn't have as much financial freedom due to its war with Starlink. Meanwhile, Phoenix Rain had earned quite a bit from the authority she wielded on Thunder Island and the harvests from the Sea of Death. Hence, in terms of financial strength, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was currently stronger than Unyielding Soul. After selling the extra items, Shi Feng had made over 20,000 gold. Both super first-rate guilds were also quite satisfied with the outcome. As the representatives of both guilds were about to leave. Since we've sold the all-round devices and elven silver, let us start the auction for today's main course, Shi Feng said, intentionally dragging out his statement. Main course. You have something even better than the all-round devices and elven silver. Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart gave Shi Feng confused looks. How could he possibly have something more valuable than the two items? Correct. Shi Feng then began to pull the standardized level 55 dark gold weapons from his bag, putting them on display before his guests. Chapter 1836, Arming Teams. The one-handed saber Shi Feng placed on the table looked quite modest, like a very ordinary weapon, yet it radiated the glow unique to dark gold weapons. A dark gold weapon that can be used up to level 55. When Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart looked at the dark gold weapon, they could not help their confusion. In terms of attributes, it was only slightly better than a level 50 dark gold weapon. While it might be very tempting to ordinary expert players, to guild upper echelon like themselves, it was nothing special. Although a level 55 dark gold weapon was indeed very valuable in terms of usefulness, There was simply no comparison between it and the all-round device or elven silver. Not to mention the level 55 dark gold weapon Shifeng just took out did not possess any special traits. It neither added any resistances nor granted extraordinarily high attributes. Hence they found it truly confusing that Shifeng was treating this weapon as the finale item. Just as Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart were wondering what Shifeng's intention was by taking out such a plain dark gold weapon, Shifeng took out another weapon from his bag and placed it on the table. This time it wasn't a saber but a great sword instead. He's selling 2 items? Blue Phoenix, who was watching from the side, was also baffled by this situation. Let alone 2 level 55 dark gold weapons, even 2 epic weapons wouldn't be enough to tempt representatives of super first-rate guilds like Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart. However, just as Blue Phoenix was having such thoughts, Shifeng proceeded to take out another weapon from his bag. Moreover, he showed no signs of stopping even after revealing the third weapon. 8. By the time 10 level 55 dark gold weapons were laid out on the table, Phoenix Rain's and Unyielding Heart's expressions had changed. While level 55 dark gold weapons were not that easy to obtain, with the current strength Zero Wing's main force possessed, they understood that Zero Wing definitely could acquire some. If it were only 2 or 3 dark gold weapons, they wouldn't have felt particularly surprised by the situation. However, having 10 level 55 dark gold weapons was an entirely different story. As you can imagine, I am able to obtain quite a number of these level 55 dark gold weapons. These 10 articles are merely samples for you to see. What do you think of these weapons? Shifeng asked, smiling as he looked at the 2 people wearing serious expressions before him. Currently, he had produced only 10 level 55 dark gold weapons. It wasn't that he did not wish to produce more but that he lacked the materials to do so. While the materials needed to produce these weapons were not very rare and were available in the market, they were not usually sold in large quantities. Collecting a sufficient amount would take considerable time. This was also the reason why the various large guilds that could produce dark gold weapons made only a very limited quantity. In the current God's domain, having 10 level 55 dark gold weapons was already a staggering feat. You still have more of these? Phoenix Rain asked, pleasantly surprised. May I know how many more of these weapons Brother Black Flame has? Unyielding Heart asked hurriedly. A single level 55 dark gold weapon was indeed nothing significant to them because one weapon could improve the combat power of only one player. The improvement would be minimal. However, after reaching a certain quantity, these level 55 dark gold weapons would have much more of an impact. With enough of these weapons, one could elevate the combat power of a team to a whole new level. Meanwhile, this increase in combat power would be very useful when a team was raiding field bosses. Not many, Shifeng said. Raising 3 fingers, he added, I only have enough to equip a 300-man team. May I know if the 2 of you are interested in this transaction? Guild leader Black Flame, you're not joking, right? Enough to equip a 300-man team? Doesn't that mean you have over 100 level 55 dark gold weapons? Mu Lingsha, who sat at a side, asked, her face twitching involuntarily. The weapons placed on the table were all meant for physical classes. None were for magical classes. By setting such a high price in the first place, so long as he could acquire 300 sets of the materials required, given his production success rate which was above 30%, he could instantly earn not only his cost but also quite an amount of materials to arm Zero Wing. Now, however, it would seem that he had somewhat underestimated the foundations of the 2 super first-rate guilds. After all, the 2 representatives before him didn't even frown as they agreed to his proposal. Apparently, they were more than capable of acquiring over 300 sets of the materials. Chapter 1837. Titan Guard Upgraded. As Shifeng started the auction, Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart placed bids in a frenzy without any concern for each other. 2,000 gold. 3,000 gold. 5,000 gold. Whether Phoenix Rain or Unyielding Heart won the items, 40 level 55 dark gold weapons would serve a great purpose. These weapons were of the utmost importance to their respective guilds' development. Naturally, they wouldn't hold back. Rather than increasing the bid in 100 gold increments, they increased it by 1,000 gold increments. In just a few minutes, the price had reached 24,000 gold with Unyielding Heart's bid. Including the cost of the materials, the total value of his offer was far more than what these 40 dark gold weapons were worth. However, Unyielding Heart did not care. Even Mu Lingsha had hinted that Unyielding Heart had to acquire the weapons regardless of the cost. Their guild currently competed with Starlink to obtain the first clear of a level 50 100-man team dungeon. Both guilds had already reached the final boss in their respective dungeons, and these weapons would ensure Unyielding Soul's victory. Even if they had to spend a little more coins than expected, they could easily earn back the cost. 30,000 gold. Phoenix Rain instantly raised the price by a significant margin. She had already acquired the all-round devices and elven silver, but if she had these dark gold weapons as well, capturing the Sea of Death's inner islands would become far easier. After competing for several more minutes, Phoenix Rain won the first batch of weapons for 40,000 gold and 300 sets of materials. Unyielding Heart then claimed the second batch for 43,000 gold and 300 sets of materials. Although he wanted to win the last batch as well, due to lack of funds and these weapons' ordinary nature, he didn't go all out in the bidding. As a result, Phoenix Rain won the third batch of weapons for 41,000 gold and 300 sets of materials. Super first-rate guilds really are rich. After Shi Feng signed a contract with both sides, joy filled his heart, although he didn't show it. He had to admit that becoming a master forger really was beneficial. Just by selling 3 batches of standardized dark gold weapons, he had earned 124,000 gold and 900 sets of materials. This price far exceeded his initial expectations. Now he had the money to construct the airport and repair the secret stone forest, in addition to enough materials to arm Zero Wings members. Had he sold these weapons in single units or to small guilds, he would never have gotten such a good price. However, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul couldn't collect the required materials as easily as Shi Feng had suspected either. This was especially true for Phoenix Rain, who would need roughly 1 day to collect all 300 sets. Unyielding Heart similarly needed a little time to collect all the materials. Shi Feng could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. He could only start crafting the weapons after he obtained the materials, and if the 2 guilds paid him in one go, he wouldn't have their purchased items ready. Hence, as a compromise, Shi Feng had asked both guilds pay a portion of the required materials as a down payment. Only after they brought the remaining materials and funds would he hand over the weapons. With this compromise, not only would he have materials to produce the weapons, but the 2 guilds would also have extra time to collect the remaining materials. Neither Phoenix Rain nor Unyielding Heart had any issues with this arrangement. They hadn't brought enough money for the purchases to begin with, so it was expected that Shi Feng ask for a down payment. Doing so would also ensure that Zero Wing couldn't sell the 120 dark gold weapons to anyone else. Neither Phoenix Rain nor Unyielding Heart had suspected that Zero Wing had crafted these weapons. They had assumed that the guild had acquired the items from farming monsters. Since their guilds didn't have the full payments ready, a down payment was understandable. Phoenix Rain and Unyielding Heart had their subordinates deliver the agreed-upon down payment, which was 30% of the full amount. In return, both guilds would be granted a full day to collect the remaining funds and materials. When the 270 sets of materials were delivered, Shi Feng recruited Melancholic Smile and Cream Cocoa to help him craft the weapons. Although standardized level 55 dark gold weapons required a lot of time to produce, with 3 master forgers working around the clock and the Philosopher's Hand's guidance, it took them no time at all to complete the 120 weapons. After less than half a day, the 3 had used all 270 sets of materials and produced 114 weapons. Including the original 10 Shi Feng had made, they had a total of 124 level 55 dark gold weapons now. Once the weapons had been forged, Shi Feng left the transaction's follow-up work to Melancholic Smile. He then contacted Aqua Rose and had her gather 20 main force members. He planned to head to the level 70 neutral map, Flame Demon's Valley. After his trade with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion and Unyielding Soul, Shi Feng realized that he had to prioritize unsealing the Philosopher's Hand fully. Partially unsealing the Philosopher's Hand had already been so profitable. If he could fully unseal it, he could nurture a large number of master lifestyle players. Not only would he be able to arm Silverwing Town to the teeth, but he'd also be able to fortify the Lost Town. Then he wouldn't have to worry about the evil god's temple, which grew stronger with each passing day in the Orc Empire. He wouldn't have to worry about Blackwater either. He could definitely afford a battle of attribution with both the evil god's temple and Blackwater simultaneously. After all, war was a competition of wealth and resources. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng felt even greater need to head to the Flame Demon's Valley. In less than half an hour, Aqua Rose had gathered Cola, Fire Dance, Violet Cloud, and the other core upper echelons. As the group approached the guild's meeting room, they chatted and discussed the recent challengers they had faced in Silverwing Town's battle arena. After Shifeng had set the battle arena's new rules, quite a few famous experts from the neighboring kingdoms and empires visited Silverwing Town to challenge Zero Wing's guild leader. Some experts had also visited the town purely to spar with Zero Wing's experts. The battle arena's popularity in Silverwing Town had skyrocketed, and it was now even more popular than the battle arena in Zero Wing City. Meanwhile, Cola and the others' arrival in White River City's guild hall had caused a commotion among the other guild members. Now that I'm so close to them, I can really feel how powerful our guild's main force members are. Commander Fire Dance is especially powerful. Recently, I've heard that of all the challenges she accepted, she won every single one of them. I've even heard that she defeated the 5th-ranked assassin in the Black Dragon Empire. Commander Fire Dance has a 3-digit winning streak. That's right. I've also heard that on the latest issue of the God's Domain Experts list, Commander Fire Dance ranks as the 319th expert thanks to her excellent battle records. But I still think that she hasn't revealed all of her strength yet. Her rank will definitely climb in the future. That's only natural. However, the current God's Domain ranking list has changed. Now, if you want to earn a spot on the list or improve your rank, you have to be strong enough and have a dazzling battle record. I wonder when I'll become a main force member. I really want to train directly under Commander Fire Dance. The guild holds a qualifying tournament once a month. You can participate as long as you become a core member. Right. I'll work hard to become a core member first. As the players in the guild hall talked about Fire Dance and the other main force members of the guild, a desire to join Zero Wing's main force overwhelmed them. Meanwhile, Shifeng, who had hidden his appearance under a black cloak, couldn't help but chuckle as he overheard the various conversations. He then made his way toward the guild hall's meeting room. "Guild leader, are we going on a major operation this time?" Cola asked eagerly after Shifeng entered the room. He had improved significantly in the battle arena lately and itched to display his new strength. "Of course. However, we have to replace your equipment first," Shifeng said, nodding. "Replace my equipment?" Cola was confused. Chapter 1838. Fragmented Legendary Shield's Hidden Effect Inside the Resplendent Meeting Room. After Shifeng clicked to upgrade the Titan Guard, the shield began to glow with a brilliant light that forced the players in the room to close their eyes. By the time everyone reopened their eyes, they felt a horrific pressure wash over them. Instinctively, these players took up a defensive stance. What's going on? What's with this powerful aura? Could it be from that shield? This can't be possible, right? This aura is as intense as that of a mythic monster. All of these players were experts and they had experienced countless life-or-death battles. They had long since developed senses that surpassed that of a wild beast. If they hadn't known that they were absolutely safe in this meeting room, they would have pulled out their weapons and prepared for combat. Once the intensity of the Titan Guard's aura reached its peak, it began to fade. So this is a fragmented legendary shield? Shifeng was inwardly shocked as he felt the Titan Guard become lighter than it had been. Although the shield had never been particularly heavy, holding it still restricted his movement. Now, however, the Titan Guard was as light as a feather. It felt as if the cold, tough metallic frame were merely an illusion. The shield's hidden effect was truly frightening. It was common knowledge in God's domain that shields were so large so the MTs could effectively block a boss's attacks. In return, the shields were considerably heavy. Of course, there were lighter shields such as wooden or steel bucklers. Although a buckler was easier to use and gave MTs more freedom of movement, its flaws were apparent with a buckler's small size. Blocking attacks properly was strenuous. This was especially true during a high-speed fight. Hence, the various large guilds' MTs usually used large, heavy shields. However, now not only did the Titan Guard possess a huge defensive area, but it was also light. It was a dream shield for any MT. Moreover, compared to the Titan Guard's hidden effect, its new attributes were truly frightening. Titan Guard, Shield, Fragmented Legendary Rank. Minimum Equipment Level, 50 Equipment Requirement, Strength 1400. Attributes adjust according to user's level. Defense plus 9450, Level 50. Block Rate 39%. Strength plus 245, Endurance plus 224, Agility plus 190. Defense Skill plus 3 levels. Reaction Ability plus 2. Strength increased by 35%, Agility increased by 30%, and Endurance increased by 30%. Ignore levels plus 20. All item level requirements reduced by 5 levels. When equipped. All magic damage received reduced by 50%. Reaction speed increased by 20%. Paralysis effects reduced by 40%. Frontal damage received reduced by 30%. All resistances increased by 30%. Additional passive skill 1 - Guardian Shield. Automatically generates a layer of guardian energy, which can block an attack and absorb a portion of the attack's strength to recover user's stamina every 10 seconds. Additional passive skill 2 - Iron Wall. Reduces the impact from incoming attacks by 50%. If attacks are of a lower tier than user, reduces damage by 70%. If attacks are of the same or higher tier than user, reduces damage by 30%. Additional active skill 1 - Titan's Heart. Generates 3 layers of protective energy that absorbs damage equivalent to 10 times of wielder's maximum HP. Increases physique by 30%, reaction speed by 20%, and movement speed by 20% for 45 seconds. During this period, battle recovery improved by 800%, and healing received increased by 100%. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 2 - Titan's Will. Becomes immune to all control effects. Reduces all damage received by 95% and weakens negative effects by 90%. Increases attack speed by 100% and movement speed by 30%. Starting movement speed set at 80% of maximum movement speed. Duration 30 seconds. Cooldown 3 minutes. Cannot stack with other defensive skills. Additional active skill 3 - Titan's Domain. Every non-friendly target within a 100-yard radius will increase wielder's basic attributes by 2%, reduces damage received by 1% and heals wielder by 0.1% HP every second. Duration, 1 minute. Cooldown, 2 hours. Maximum number of targets, 100. With these attributes, an ordinary MT could immediately become a peak MT by equipping the Titan Guard. Guild Leader, how are the attributes? Kola asked excitedly. Take a look for yourself, Shifeng said, chuckling. He then passed the Titan Guard back to Kola. When Kola received the Titan Guard, he noticed the change to the shield's weight. When he saw the shield's attributes, even his breathing became harsh. Guild Leader, can we go find a mythic boss? Kola asked, staring at Shifeng with desire in his eyes. He was like a swordsman that had just acquired a treasured sword and was eager to test out his new weapon. Kola had worn the best equipment in God's domain. Even while wielding the epic-ranked Titan Guard, he could tank a mythic monster of the same level. Now that Titan Guard had been upgraded, he felt that he could face a mythic monster head-on. Of course, he knew that was a misconception. After all, a mythic monster was still a mythic monster. Although he couldn't face a mythic monster in a direct confrontation, he was confident of tanking a mythic monster by himself. Whether or not he could kill the monster would depend on his team's DPS. Relax. You'll have plenty of opportunities later, Shifeng assured his guildmate, smiling. Shifeng had already been roughly 50% certain that he could complete his quest in the Flame Demon's Valley, but with the fragmented legendary ranked Titan Guard, his success rate had risen to 80% at the minimum. following which Shi Feng had everyone switch to fire resistance equipment. He also allocated several all-round devices, elven silver, and the master-ranked fire resistance potion, which Silent Wonder had crafted. His teammates were confused. After equipping the fire resistance equipment, they had over 100 points in fire resistance. With so much, they shouldn't have any issues raiding the current large-scale team dungeons with high-temperature environments. Yet Shi Feng wanted them to use master fire resistance potions as well. Just where were they going? We're heading to the Flame Demon's Valley. Before we go, I have to remind you all that once we're in the valley, you must follow me closely. You absolutely must not get lost, Shi Feng said. The Flame Demon's Valley? Isn't that a level 70+ danger zone? Aqua Rose, who was relatively familiar with God's Domain's maps, asked, shocked. The other players gasped when they heard Aqua Rose's question. While they weren't familiar with the Flame Demon's Valley, they knew what a danger zone was. The Black Dragon Empire had quite a few danger zones, as did Starmoon Kingdom. However, they had never heard of a guild successfully exploring either country's level 30 to 40 danger zones. At most, some guilds had played around in these danger zones' outer regions, but they didn't dare venture to the inner areas as death was almost certain upon entry. While part of the reason was the danger zone's extraordinarily harsh environments, the map's monsters were far more dangerous and extremely powerful. Not only did the danger zone's monsters have incredibly high basic attributes, but they also displayed very high combat standards. Even the weakest monster in danger zones had combat standards at the Trial Tower's 3rd floor. Meanwhile, as one ventured further into the zone, they'd face even stronger monsters. Near the inner regions, one would begin to encounter monsters that could reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor. Just thinking about a group of several hundred of such monsters would make any expert player shudder with fear. Yet Shi Feng had so casually mentioned that they were about to head to a level 70+ danger zone. If Aqua Rose hadn't told them about the Flame Demon's Valley, they would have assumed that they were going to some ordinary map based on Shi Feng's tone. Relax. I've already investigated the area. Once we enter, you just need to follow my lead. Naturally, Shi Feng knew what kind of horrors to expect in the Flame Demon's Valley. Danger zones are also blessed maps. Now that they had learned of a place where they could train and improve their abilities, of course they wanted to visit it. Shi Feng then led his team to Starmoon City before teleporting to the Flame Dragon Empire and again to one of its border towns. In the end, Shi Feng used the 7 Luminaries Ring's spatial gate to transport everyone across the remaining distance. After several hours, the team finally arrived before a valley that radiated waves of heat. Despite just standing at the valley's entrance, the area was hot enough to sting their skin. They did not even dare to imagine how high the temperature would be once they entered the valley. Guild leader, there seemed to be some people ahead. Minor Wind, who had used eagle eyes to observe their surroundings, suddenly reported as he pointed at the smoke-choked path ahead of them. People. Shi Feng was astonished. Just getting to the Flame Demon's Valley was a difficult task for current players, not to mention fighting in such a harsh environment. Amazing. They're fighting a level 72 boss. And they're overwhelming it. Minor Wind exclaimed as he watched these players fight. Guild leader, some of our guild members are among them. Our guild? How? Shi Feng was even more surprised to hear that his people were present. Following which, Minor Wind sent Shi Feng a recording. Why are they here? As Shi Feng watched the video, he discovered that there really were 0 wing members among the group. One of them was the Elementalist Thoughtful Rain, and the other was the Cleric Blue Bamboo. Both wore 0 Wings' 6-winged emblem. Currently, Thoughtful Rain was level 56, while Blue Bamboo was level 55. In terms of levels, these two could already contend with the various superpowers experts. Guild leader, what should we do? Aqua Rose asked. Normally, players would be on guard when they encountered others in the fields. After all, PKs were far from uncommon. If one were not careful, other players might even mug them. Furthermore, the unexpected party was engaged in a boss fight. They should be even more on guard. However, the Flame Demon's Valley only had one entrance. They couldn't just wait until the other party finished their raid. Moreover, they had already used their all-round devices, Elven Silver and Master Fire Resistance potions, all of which had time limits. Let's wait and watch them for now, Shifeng said after giving the matter some thought. Chapter 1839 Neutral Races. Piles of large rocks decorated the scorching valley. Due to the constant screen of black smoke from within the valley, it was extremely difficult to examine the area with the naked eye. One would be fortunate if they could see up to 200 yards away. Even those with stronger physiques would only see an additional 20 or 30 yards. Only with skills like eagle eyes could players see up to 700 to 800 yards. While 700 or 800 yards might seem far, it was nothing to monsters in a level 70+ danger zone. These monsters could normally see up to 500 yards. Due to the level difference between these monsters and Zero Wings players, the monsters would have an easier time discovering them. If they were not careful, the monsters might even notice them from 800 yards away. Under Shifeng's lead, Zero Wings' team quickly moved to 200 yards away from Thoughtful Rain's team. Rocks and smoke obscured their position, so the other team would find it difficult to notice their presence. Isn't that Rain? Aka Rose was a little surprised as she watched Thoughtful Rain in battle. Her combat standard has improved by quite a bit. Thoughtful Rain dealt with 3 level 70 Lord-ranked Flame Demon guards, which moved alongside the boss monster by herself, yet despite being outleveled and outnumbered, she faced the 3 lords on equal footing. She had thoroughly distracted the 3 flaming humanoids, allowing her teammates to focus on the boss. It was evident that her combat standard had already reached the refinement realm. However, Thoughtful Rain's teammates were even more surprising. None of these players were human but foreign races. They were either half-beastmen with tiger ears and tails or half-elves with snowy white skin and pointed ears. What is going on? They're not actually human? Fire Dance exclaimed in shock. Every player on Zero Wings' team was shocked. As far as they knew, it was only possible to play a human when starting the game. There weren't any other races to choose from. Although they had encountered demon players and monster players, they were transformations. Technically, they still identified as human. However, the players on Thoughtful Rain's team were different. Their initial statistics showed that they weren't humans who could transform. Instead, their races identified as half-beastmen or half-elves. While Shifeng found the situation surprising as well, he did not find it particularly strange. Moreover, he finally understood why these other players were here. In God's domain, players were only allowed to play as human at the start of the game. There were no other racial options to choose from. However, after reaching level 30 and beyond, players could head to neutral races' habitats to complete conversion quests, becoming half-beastmen or half-elves. Although players would gain some racial abilities after becoming half-beastmen or half-elves, they'd abandon their identities as human and lose the protection of God's domain's ruling race. These players would find it far more difficult to move about on the continent and in the game. Not all kingdoms and empires permitted entry to neutral races. Only a very small number of countries did so. Even so, there were still many expert players that willingly converted. Neutral races' racial abilities were very tempting, and although these abilities wouldn't improve one's basic attributes directly, they would improve one's physical abilities. For example, half-beastmen generally gained more mobility, reaction speed, and perception. Half-beastmen were natural-born warriors. As for half-elves, they were magic's favored children. They would find magic-related tasks far easier than the other races. Both the half-beastmen and half-elf races also provided higher innate resistances. As a result, neutral players could survive and fight in maps with harsh environments, such as danger zones. In addition, like demon players, half-beastmen and half-elves were differentiated based on their bloodline purity. The purer one's bloodline, the stronger their racial abilities would be. In exchange for these benefits, not only would players face racial discrimination, but they'd also have a more difficult time upgrading their tiers. With the same combat standards and combat power, a human might be promoted to Tier 3, but a half-beastman or half-elf might only reach Tier 2. Chapter 1840, No Need for Explanations. Guild Leader, it seems that we've been discovered, Aqua Rose said as she felt the killing intent radiating from the female half-elf elementalist. However, she did not reveal any signs of panic at being discovered. Instead, she calmly smiled and said, It also seems that the other party doesn't appreciate our good intentions. Forget it, since they don't, so be it, Shifeng said, shaking his head and laughing. Since they've spoken, let's head over. Kill-stealing was a frequent occurrence in the fields. For such expert neutral players to come all the way to such a high-level danger zone, it was highly unlikely that they were just here to kill bosses. The only possibility he could think of was that these players were here for a high-ranked quest or had found a clue leading to one. Either way, they wouldn't like being discovered by other players. For example, Shifeng didn't want anyone to learn about his quest to unseal the Philosopher's Hand. If they did, it would definitely cause trouble for him and his guild. Even now, he hadn't told anyone about the quest, not even his teammates. Any players that had an important quest or were trying to pick one up would conceal their activities. When discovered, they'd greet the offending players with hostility. It wouldn't even be surprising if these players attacked without warning. Hence, to avoid a misunderstanding, Shifeng had decided to maintain his distance, hiding his team throughout the raid. First, he wanted to avoid unnecessary combat. Second, Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo were members of this neutral team. If Zero Wings members suddenly showed up in this deserted area, the team would suspect Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo of leaking information. Third, he didn't want others to know what Zero Wing was doing in the Flame Demon's Valley. However, the female half-elf elementalist's perception had exceeded Shifeng's expectations. He had never expected the woman to sense them 200 yards away despite her involvement in the intense battle. Even with his physique, he had barely seen the battle from this distance. The only other player that had seen the battle clearly was Minor Wind, who had activated Eagle Eyes. The other team's members had been busy with the fight, making it impossible to maintain Eagle Eyes. Hence, he hadn't expected to be discovered. However, since the team had noticed them, he had no choice but to reveal himself and see how events unfolded. Meanwhile, the half-beastmen and half-elves warily watched Shifeng's group approach. Guild leader, our tracks have been discovered. Should we kill them? A level 55 Tier 2 berserker, a half-beastman in armor and wielding a white bone spear, asked, lacing his words with killing intent. Let's hear them out first. At the end of the day, this map is controlled by the human race. Moreover, we're already halfway through our quest. An interruption will only make it more difficult to complete, the female half-elf elementalist quietly responded. During the battle, she had discovered Shifeng's group, but she had remained silent about it to see what the other players intended at first. She had assumed that the team was here to keep steal, but even after the boss had died, Shifeng's group had been motionless. This proved that Shifeng's group had no designs on their loot. Even so, she couldn't let the other party follow them. After all, she had an important quest to complete. She could only expose the team and persuade them to leave. Of course, the decision had some risk. If negotiations soured, it was likely they would have to fight each other. If Shifeng's group insisted on following them, she would have to act. Her quest offered an extraordinary reward, which would qualitatively transform their guild. With this reward, it was entirely possible that their guild would instantly become as strong as a first-rate guild. As Shifeng's group increasingly closer to the female half-elf's team, Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo, who were busy with 3 flame demon guards, stared with wide eyes. Rain, aren't they from our guild? Even Vice Guild Leader Aqua and Commander Fire Dance are here, Blue Bamboo said, stupefied. What should we do? Will Big Sis Melody suspect us of leaking information? The team they had joined on this expedition to the Flame Demon's Valley for a quest was extremely important to Melody, the guild leader of Ninth Heaven. This quest could even determine the life or death of Melody's guild. Hence, the woman had repeatedly forbidden them from telling anyone about the quest. Neither she nor Thoughtful Rain had spoken a word of their actions, yet their guild members had shown up here. At this point, avoiding a misunderstanding was almost impossible. We don't have a choice. We have to explain to Big Sis Melody and hope that she understands. But this is really a terrible coincidence, Thoughtful Rain, who kept the 3 flame demon guards busy, said helplessly. Unfortunately, as Shifeng's group approached, Melody and the other Ninth Heaven members noticed the 6-winged emblem on these players' chests. A 6-winged emblem? Isn't that the same one that Rain and Blue wear? Could they be Zero Wings members? Guild leader, we haven't said anything about this operation to anyone. How could Zero Wings members be here? Could it be? Did Rain and Blue? I knew outsiders couldn't. Suddenly the half-beastmen and half-elves turned to thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo. Although they did not question the two directly, they watched the women with questioning gazes. Enough. I'll handle this. Melody roared as she shot her team members a chilling look. Let's find out why they're here first. Suddenly this team of neutral players heard a deep voice. I am Black Flame Zero Wings Guild Leader. My team and I have a task in the Flame Demons Valley. May I ask you to remain here for some time? Once we're done we'll invite you in. Shifeng's voice was sonorous, echoing throughout the valley. Moreover, his aura was imposing. He felt like an ancient behemoth that had just woken. Damn it. It's true. When Melody's team members heard Shifeng's statement, they glared at thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo with indignation. Meanwhile, thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo were at a loss for words. They felt as if any explanation would be useless. Guild leader, since they've come to steal our quest, we should kill them, one of the Tier 2 berserkers said, exuding killing intent. I want to see just how powerful Zero Wing truly is. They had more or less heard of Zero Wing. This guild, which had started with nothing, had gone on to take control of Star Moon Kingdom. The guild was powerful enough to rival a first-rate guild, many times stronger than Ninth Heaven. However, they didn't think that they'd lose to Zero Wing's experts in terms of individual combat standards. They had the innate advantage of half-beastmen and half-elves, which would be particularly prominent in PvP. Waving to her teammates for quiet, Melody turned to thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo. In a low tone she asked, I just want to ask one thing. Did you two leak our secret? Big sis Melody, we didn't say anything about this, thoughtful Rain insisted. Blue Bamboo nodded, repeated, firm resolution in her eyes. All right, I believe you, Melody said, revealing a gentle smile. She did not think that thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo would betray her trust. She then turned back to Shifeng and said, Hello, Guild Leader Black Flame. I am Melody, the Guild Leader of Ninth Heaven. May I know why we cannot enter? That way I'll understand what I should do. Although there was no arrogance in Melody's voice, her voice held no deference either. Rather, her tone contained questions and threats. Depending on Shifeng's explanation, she wouldn't shy from a battle to the death or mutual destruction. Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo tensed. The reason? Shifeng suddenly laughed. I'm afraid that you don't qualify to demand answers from me. Moreover, Zero Wing has never needed to explain itself. All you need to know is that you are not allowed entry for the moment. But compared to Shifeng's damage, what truly surprised the other guild leader was his ability to land his attack against the three moving lords without harming thoughtful Rain, despite being over 60 yards away. Moreover, Shifeng had sent his attack through the other team, striking the flame demon guards before they had been able to react. Shifeng's timing and skill usage were godlike. This stunned Melody and the Ninth Heaven members, who had planned to put up a fight. Without another word, Shifeng led his team into the Flame Demons Valley, leaving the dumbstruck members of Ninth Heaven behind. Chapter 1841, Rich Danger Zone. Melody and her teammates only breathed a sigh of relief after Shifeng's group had vanished. Too strong. The strength and frightening aura Shifeng had displayed had been stifling. For a moment they even thought that they had already died. So that is Rain and Blue's guild. How could such a powerful expert exist? When Ninth Heaven's members turned to thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo, who still fought the three flame demon guards, they watched the women with shock and fear. They had never realized that Zero Wing was so powerful. The racial talents they were so proud of were little more than a joke before Shifeng. Even thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo, who had thought that they understood their own guild, couldn't help but gape after witnessing Shifeng's attack. Not only had Shifeng's single attack alleviated the pressure they faced, but he had also shocked Ninth Heaven's experts, deterring them from attacking. Among the Ninth Heaven experts present, quite a few were even stronger than the two of them. This was especially true for Melody. Melody wore 3 pieces of epic equipment and had stronger combat standards than them, yet against Shifeng's attack, even she had failed to react. Melody also could not help but shake her head and smile bitterly as she looked at the 3 flame demon guards' wounds. She had intended on threatening Zero Wing and questioning Zero Wing's purpose in the Flame Demon's Valley. After all, both teams had roughly the same number of players. Even if their teams fought, she did not think that her team would lose. At worst, their teams would suffer mutual destruction. However, reality proved that her thoughts were laughable. Guild leader, what should we do? Are we going to give up just like that? A tall, robust Tier 2 Tigerman Berserker asked. Before he had seen Shifeng's power, he had been confident in defeating Zero Wing's members, but after he understood one thing. He absolutely must not clash with Shifeng. He would only find his death if he did. He hadn't only come to that conclusion because of Shifeng's superior basic attributes, but also because of the technique the swordsman had displayed. Why should we give up? We've gone to great lengths to find this quest, and Flame Demon's Valley is so large. Do you really think that they have eyes in every corner of the valley? A Tier 2 female ranger carrying an icy, crystalline bow said, clicking her tongue. She had no intentions of giving up on their quest. Moreover, she refused to believe that Shifeng's group would notice them sneaking into the Flame Demon's Valley. Forget it. Let's just wait here, Melody said, shaking her head. I don't think that Zero Wing is here for our quest anyway. They must be here for something more important. Otherwise, with Zero Wing's strength, they wouldn't need to waste words on us. They could have simply gotten rid of us before entering the valley. Hearing Melody's decision, the other members nodded in agreement, seeing the logic in her words. It would have been much easier and safer just to get rid of them, rather than asking them to wait at the valley's entrance. They had just witnessed Shifeng's prowess personally, and they doubted that he'd need long to annihilate their team. If Shifeng wished it, he could have killed several of them with that attack, and they would have been powerless to do anything about it. We should also thank Rain and Blue. Large guilds generally dislike others following them during a large-scale operation. Generally, they seal off the area. Even if they don't, they tend to get rid of any potential threats. Yet Black Flame had simply forbidden us from entering the valley rather than kill us. Let's not stir up any more trouble, Melody explained. When large guilds were on an important mission, they definitely didn't show mercy. Chapter 1842, Attributed or Vain. Upon hearing Fire Dance mention an or vain, everyone's eyes glowed with excitement. Or vains were extremely rare in God's domain and particularly in Starmoon Kingdom. This was because Starmoon Kingdom was a relatively balanced kingdom. While the kingdom had no lack of herbs, ores, wood and food materials, it did not specialize in any of these resources. Hence, or veins were very rare in the kingdom. Whenever one was found, it would be highly contested over. An or vein? What type is it? Shifeng asked curiously. He wasn't particularly surprised by the fact that an or vein had appeared in the Flame Demon's Valley. After all, this was a mountainous region. It was also a danger zone, a map famed for abundant resources. However, although or veins were generally quite valuable, they were also differentiated by rank. For example, the difference between a bronze vein and a magic crystal vein was like heaven and earth. Although a bronze vein could tempt ordinary large guilds, it wouldn't be particularly helpful to Zero Wing. At the very least, it wouldn't be occupying if it were in the Flame Demon's Valley. The Flame Demon's Valley was a danger zone and home to very dangerous monsters. The map's harsh environment would only make it even more difficult to mine the vein. Even super guilds had a hard time setting up mining operations in danger zones within kingdoms and empires, and the Flame Demon's Valley was both a neutral map and a danger zone. Normally, superpowers ignored or veins in danger zones. The rewards simply weren't worth the effort. A source fire vein. Fire Dance exclaimed. When Fire Dance reported the vein's identity, her teammates let out a gasp. In their opinion, finding a copper or mithril vein was already exciting, yet they had stumbled across a source fire vein. Source fire. Shifeng's heart raced upon hearing this. A source fire vein was a bona fide grade 2 vein. Unlike ordinary grade 2 veins, a source fire vein was also an attributed or vein. It was extremely rare even among grade 2 veins. Normally, an or vein didn't attributes, just like how ores were normally unattributed. However, if an or had an attribute, its price would increase by several-fold. For example, frost steel ore was an ice-type ore. When using this type of ore to forge weapons, the weapons produced would deal additional frost damage. When used to produce equipment, the equipment would have additional ice resistance. This was why attributed ore veins were far more valuable than their non-attributed counterparts. Superpowers would even fight over a grade 3 attributed vein, not to mention a grade 2 vein. If the various superpowers found out about this source fire vein, they would do everything they could to acquire it. The vein might not be as valuable as a grade 1 vein, but it would greatly help their members when raiding dungeons or exploring new maps. Even if the price were great, they would pay it to secure the source fire vein. However, Shifeng had never heard of an attributed ore vein in the Flame Demon's Valley in the past, leaving him a little confused. Had such a vein existed, the Flame Demon's Valley would have been a battlefield for the various superpowers, rather than some obscure map that no one cared about. Send the coordinates. We'll head there immediately. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng wanted to verify the authenticity of the vein. If the source fire vein were real, it could help Zero Wing's rapid advance in both ship and weapon production. After Fire Dance relayed her current coordinates, Shifeng led the team, slowly approaching the assassin's location. Fire Dance was situated before a canyon that was surrounded by mountains and lava. The canyon was clear of black smoke, so visibility was excellent. Only the terrain was extremely dangerous. There were also a large number of giant lava beasts in the area. Shifeng's eyes burned with desire as he gazed at the source fire Oregon. Although the vein seemed small, it was definitely a source fire vein. How unfortunate. There are too many lava monsters nearby. There's even a level 80 mythic monster guarding the canyon's entrance. We don't have a chance of securing the vein, Aqua Rose said, slightly frustrated as she looked at the cave entrance. With their current strength, they might be able to defeat level 60 mythic monsters, but a level 80 mythic ranked monster was still too difficult. Furthermore, they had to fight the lava creature in such an extreme environment. Under such circumstances, they wouldn't be able to defeat the lava hound even if they were level 80. This was because this was a danger zone. The monsters here had much higher combat standards than monsters in a normal map. Including the frightening attributes of a mythic monster, they had no hope against the level 80 lava hound unless they returned at level 90 or 100. Lava creatures were different from ordinary monsters. Players would be subjected to the burning heat radiating from the monster's body if they got close to it. Even if players had sufficiently high fire resistance to avoid taking any damage, they'd still feel the searing pain. This pain would significantly affect players' combat power and prevent them from fighting at their best. However, this was not the most frightening aspect about lava creatures. Lava creatures' corrosive ability was far more dangerous. Weapons and equipment would rapidly lose durability when they came into contact with these creatures. If the items lost all durability mid-battle, they'd be permanently lost. Because of this, players tried to avoid lava monsters as much as possible. Meanwhile, every monster in the canyon was a lava creature. Trying to clear out these monsters long-term would be hell. Not only would they fail to acquire the vein, but they would also sacrifice a large number of weapons and equipment. If they tried to construct a mining base here, a large number of monsters would assault the base during its construction. If the mining base were destroyed, all resources they had invested would be lost. On the off chance that they managed to construct a mining base here, there was also the problem of manpower. Zero Wing simply couldn't afford to station a lot of players here. This was the Flame Demon's Valley's core. Its harsh environment could easily kill the guild's players. Players needed sufficiently high fire resistance to survive here. They were only able to explore this area because they were fully equipped in fire resistance equipment and had consumed master fire resistance potions. If any other player stood in their place right now, the extreme temperatures would have long since claimed their lives. The rest of the team agreed with Aqua Rose's assessment, a little disappointed. While the source fire vein before them was a priceless treasure, they could only afford to view it from afar. Meanwhile, as Shifeng examined the roaming lava monsters, he fell deep into thought. Not many people knew the true value of an attributed ore vein in God's domain yet. However, he did. The source fire vein would be particularly valuable to the current Zero Wing. Not only did the vein produce source fire ore which could be used to increase the guild's overall combat power by a significant margin, but the vein also produced the super-rare byproduct, flame source crystals. Flame source crystals were incredibly useful to master alchemists, but they were also one of the main materials to produce the epic set equipment, Broken Steel, a set exclusive to his Blade Saint class. Lava creatures? After carefully observing the terrain and the wandering lava monsters, Shi Feng said, while it would be impossible to set up a mining base here, it isn't entirely impossible to harvest the ore. They could freely explore the Ore Empire and cross swords with the Ore Empire's evil god's temple. They had long since grown tired of the evil god's temple's antics by this point. Chapter 1843, Titan's Might. When Zero Wings members heard that it was possible to mine the source fire vein, their eyes glowed with excitement. They all had a certain understanding of ore veins, so they knew that the source fire vein was a grade 2 ore vein. This meant that there was a certain chance to obtain magic crystals when mining it. This was something the various large guilds sorely lacked right now, especially Zero Wing. Currently, Zero Wing was expanding and recruiting more members. This meant that the guild needed to nurture far more players. Although Zero Wing had training locations like the Battle Arena, the guild members still had to train in the Divine Colosseum's Trial Tower. Zero Wing's battle arenas simply couldn't accommodate enough people. The Trial Tower also provided comprehensive training, testing players' limits. If Zero Wing could acquire a large number of magic crystals, the guild would be able to transform the new recruits into usable combat power. Right now, the majority of Zero Wing's members wouldn't be useful in large-scale combat. This was also why Zero Wing's members couldn't venture far from Silverwing Town, and the guild couldn't develop properly in the Ore Empire. We'll have to give it a try before we'll know if it's truly possible. I can only say that we have around a 30% success rate, Shi Feng said, shaking his head. He wasn't particularly confident in his plan. While it was common knowledge that lava monsters were extremely difficult to deal with, not many knew that lava monsters also had obvious weaknesses: ice and water-type attacks. In addition, an ice or water-type environment would dull the lava monster's reactions to an extreme. Once the lava creature's reactions dulled, they'd become far easier to deal with. However, lava monsters filled the canyon before them. In addition, they were nowhere near the monster's levels. If they tried to lure a single lava monster, they'd likely attract a large group instead. They also had to worry about the level 80 mythic lava hound. Moreover, this was the Flame Demon's Valley. The environment was extremely hot. Even after equipping fire resistance equipment and drinking master fire resistance potions, the heat still affected them considerably, and they couldn't fully exhibit their combat powers. Picking a fight with the lava hound would be suicide. Hence, he wasn't confident in success. A 30% success rate? It's so high. Some hope is better than none at all. Guild leader, just tell us what you need us to do. When they heard their chance of success, the team grew excited rather than disappointed. Even the various superpowers weren't likely to occupy this source fire vein, but if Zero Wing could, it could grow into a super first-rate guild within a short time. Zero Wing would then be able to compete for dominance over God's domain. It would no longer be limited to its status as a kingdom's #1 guild. Aqua Rose, who had once been an honorary elder in the veteran first-rate guild Twilight Echo, had never thought that Zero Wing would one day have a chance of becoming a super first-rate guild. Despite so many years of development, Twilight Echo had never reached the point where it had the potential of becoming a super first-rate guild, yet Zero Wing already had. Alright, since everyone is in agreement, Aqua and those with the Sea God's legacy, ready your spells. You should have learned quite a few water-type spells. As for the remaining elementalists, prepare to use ice-type spells. Try to use as many AoE spells as possible. I don't need you all to attack. I just need you to transform this canyon into a world of ice and water. As long as you can change the environment, the lava monsters will weaken and become much easier to deal with. If you succeed, we'll have a chance of getting the vein. Kola, Turtledove, and Yi Wumian. Once Aqua and the others begin, you three need to do everything you can to lure the monsters away from the canyon's entrance. Kola, you'll be responsible for tanking the lava hound. All you need to do is lure it away. Everyone else will use the ice and water-type magic scrolls I'll distribute in a moment. I don't need you to buy a lot of time. 5 or 6 minutes will be enough. No matter what happens, do not use power of darkness. We'll need it later. When Shifeng finished explaining his plan, his teammate gulped as they glanced at the 8-meter-tall lava hound. They had no confidence of defeating the mythic monster. The other level 70+ lava monsters shouldn't be an issue, but distracting a level 80 mythic monster for 5 or 6 minutes would be a massive challenge. An unsuppressed level 80 mythic monster would most likely kill them with a single slap, and they weren't allowed to use their berserk skills. Surprisingly, however, Cola brimmed with fighting spirit. If nobody has any problems, let's begin, Shifeng said. After scouting the terrain for about 10 minutes, Aqua Rose and the other casters finally decided on their positions. Meanwhile, after Cola, Turtle Dove, and Yi Wumian prepared to pull every monster's aggro in the canyon. Good. Let's begin. Shifeng commanded once everyone was in position. Immediately, Aqua Rose and the others started to chant incantations and draw runes, drawing a large amount of water and ice-type mana towards them. The non-magical class players also activated their water and ice-type magic scrolls. The flow of mana soon attracted the attention of nearby monsters. These monsters instantly searched for the change's source. However, before these lava monsters discovered Aqua Rose and her companions' locations, AoE spells began to descend. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, icicles and waterfalls rained down from the top of the canyon walls. As the streams of ice and water reached the bottom of the canyon, the molten lava vaporized the ice and water, filling the canyon with a dense mist. At the same time, the canyon's temperature began to decrease. Unfortunately, Aqua Rose and the other spells were only temporary. Their spells couldn't stop the lava from spewing out of the ground and canyon walls. Damn it! Why is there so much lava? If we can't stop it, changing the environment will be impossible, Blackie said, anxiety filling his heart as he watched water and ice become steam. If they failed to change the environment, the lava monsters would easily annihilate them. They shouldn't even dream of securing the source fire vein. Seeing the swarm of lava monsters charge up the canyon, Cola and the other MTs began to grow nervous. These level 70+ lava monsters hadn't weakened in the slightest. Seems the effects are quite good. Everything is coming along just as I expected. Shifeng smiled as he watched the rising steam. He then took out the ancient weather book and activated weather control. He hadn't actually expected Aqua Rose and the others to change the environment here by themselves. After all, only powerful domain skills could accomplish such a feat. Only a fool would try to change an area's environment with ordinary AoE spells. While the ancient weather book could alter an area's weather, it was too difficult to do so in such an inferno. It would take a very long time for the ancient weather book to alter this environment enough to impact the lava monsters. Meanwhile, the lava hound would have killed the entire team several times. Hence, he needed Aqua Rose and the others to create enough steam in the valley to hasten the ancient weather book's alteration process. Suddenly, a powerful storm began to brew above the canyon, dark clouds forming in the sky. After 5 seconds, rain began to fall, showering the lava monsters. As the rainwater covered their bodies, the lava monstress cried out in pain. Their body temperatures rapidly began to cool. Not only did the lava monster's movement speed begin to decrease, but they also seemed sluggish. Oh! The lava hound raged as the rain drenched its body, its howl so powerful that it even pushed away the descending rainwater and rubble on the ground. The lava hound then charged for Shifeng, swiping a paw as it pounced on the swordsman. You're not getting past me. When the lava hound ignored him, Cola activated Titan's domain and ran at the beast with his shield raised. Boom! Sparks scattered when the lava hound's nails scratched against Cola's Titan guard. The lava hound's gigantic body came to an abrupt halt. Meanwhile, Cola only stumbled 3 steps backward, a damage exceeding -1,000 appearing above his head. To Cola, who had over 90,000 HP, this damage was practically negligible. So strong. Cola can actually tank that thing by himself. Everyone was surprised to see Cola barely harmed. This was a level 80 mythic monster they were talking about. Although the rain had somewhat weakened the lava hound, it was a mythic monster, yet Kola had received its attack effortlessly without any help. Even Shifeng was shocked by how little damage Kola had taken. He finally understood just how frightening a fragmented legendary shield was. By the looks of it, the Guardian Knight should have no problems tanking the lava hound by himself even if he didn't use Titan's domain. Shifeng also dismissed the worry that plagued his heart. He then activated Gale domain and flew toward the cave entrance in the distance. He quickly reached the mine, realizing that its entrance was so small that barely 3 people shoulder to shoulder would be able to enter at the same time. The instant Shifeng set foot in the mine, a series of system notifications reached his ears. Moreover, he wasn't the only person to receive the system notifications. Everyone in the Flame Demon's Valley had received them. Chapter 1844, Underground Country. System, congratulations. You have discovered the Fire God's ancient land. Flame Demon's Valley Region System announcement. A player has triggered the new expansion pack, Underground Country, and activated the Primordial Taboo Seal. Players may enter the Underground Country in 10 days. The system announcement repeated 3 times, the system's indifferent voice echoing in everyone's minds for quite some time. Underground Country? Shifeng was stunned. Fire God's ancient land. He had never heard of the Flame Demon's Valley containing some kind of underground country during his previous life. He only knew that the Fire Demon's Valley's monsters had a high drop rate for source fire ore and magic crystals, and a few superpowers had fought fiercely over the area. However, this new expansion pack had never been triggered in the past. Although he had never heard of the Fire God's ancient land before, he was very familiar with ancient lands. Any location that was considered an ancient land had existed before the Great Destruction. Only, these locations had disappeared from the public eye after the Great Destruction. Meanwhile, these ancient lands were rumored to have been blessed by ancient gods, which was why they had survived for so long. But as time passed, these ancient lands had become relics. Among the various ancient lands that had been discovered during Shifeng's life, some contained items that had even been famous during ancient times. These items had all been highly sought after by the various superpowers. Hence, the various superpowers had fought desperately to claim any discovered ancient lands in the past. Shifeng had never thought that the source fire vein they had found was actually an entrance to the Fire God's ancient land. This rendered Shifeng speechless. Now that the system announcement had been made, the underground country in the Flame Demon's Valley would be exposed sooner or later. The source fire vein would definitely be discovered as well. Meanwhile, the Flame Demon's Valley was tens of thousands of miles away from Star Moon Kingdom. If the Fire Dragon Empire's superpowers wanted to claim the vein, he'd be powerless to stop them. Fortunately, it wasn't easy to reach the Flame Demon's Valley's core. Players would need high enough fire resistance to do so. Triggering this new expansion pack also excited Zero Wings members. Although they didn't know what the underground country was, they knew that this expansion pack represented a huge opportunity. Every kingdom and empire had its own specialty products, and no player had ever explored this underground country yet. This meant that they could monopolize the underground country's specialty products. Depending on the item's value, they could make a fortune by reselling them. Although Zero Wings members were excited about the new expansion pack, when they returned their attention to the horrific number of approaching monsters, they suppressed their excitement and focused on their enemies. As for Shifeng, after a moment of surprise, he quickly charged into the source fire vein and started building a marker for a teleportation magic array. Trying to get all of his team members into the Flame Demon's Valley's core had already been incredibly difficult, not to mention sending an army into the valley. No guild in God's domain would be able to do so at this stage of the game, so it was impossible to mine this source fire vein long-term. However, while this task might be impossible for other guilds, the same was not true for Zero Wing. As long as he set up a teleportation marker, he could transport players via teleportation array. Not only would it save his players a lot of travel time, but they could also avoid unnecessary battles in the Flame Demon's Valley. Unfortunately, due to the massive distance between teleportation arrays, the magic crystal cost would be considerable. But compared to the source fire vein's value, the teleportation fees were almost negligible. Aside from the fact that magic crystals could drop from the source fire vein, the source fire ore was incredibly valuable. It also had a small chance of dropping flame source crystals. Meanwhile, in a hot, sandy area in the Flame Demon's Valley's inner region, Melody and her team worked on clearing out the monsters in an ancient ruin. When Shifeng entered the source fire vein, they too had heard the regional announcement regarding the new expansion pack. Amazing! Someone actually triggered a new expansion pack in the Flame Demon's Valley. That should be Zero Wing's doing. Is it the matter they mentioned earlier? Although I don't know what the underground country is, it must have a lot of valuable items. Our ninth heaven has struck gold. The only other guild that should be in the Flame Demon's Valley is Zero Wing. Our two guilds should be the only ones who know about this underground country. We'll make a fortune by reselling the items from it. Excitement flashed in the eyes of the Ninth Heaven's members when they heard the system announcement. Traveling into human kingdoms and empires was intensely difficult for neutral races, so any items they purchased in Forest City were far above market price. Now that they had discovered the underground country, they could sell its unique items in Forest City. They'd be able to make a fortune and rapidly develop their guild. So this is Zero Wing's strength? Melody revealed a bitter smile when she read the system announcement. She had been smug and satisfied because she had accepted a high-ranked quest with an extraordinary reward. In contrast, Zero Wing had triggered a new expansion pack in the Flame Demon's Valley. The difference between them was immense. Previously she had still suspected Zero Wing of targeting Ninth Heaven. But now her suspicions were laughable. To Zero Wing, her high-ranked quest wasn't likely worth a second glance. While Ninth Heaven's members envied Zero Wing for activating a new expansion pack, Shifeng frantically set up the teleportation array's marker. Setting up a teleportation marker was not an easy task. Players needed a considerable understanding of magic arrays to succeed. The procedures were extremely complex, and normally, a player would need a lot of time to set up the marker and connect it to a teleportation array. However, to Shifeng, who was adept in drawing advanced magic arrays, this task was easier. He swiftly etched magic arrays on one crystal after another before placing the crystals on a large magic array he had carved into the ground. Very quickly, the mana in the mine started to gather in the magic array. Shifeng could feel the mine's dense mana begin to dwindle. Oh! Suddenly, Shifeng heard a furious howl from outside of the mine, echoing on the mine's stone walls. Guild leader trouble. The lava hound went berserk and is charging towards you. It's ignoring aggro completely. Aqua Rose shouted in the team chat when she saw the enraged lava hound rush back to the canyon. To current players, a berserk level 80 mythic monster was an absolute nightmare. Kola had tried to stop the lava hound with his shield but had instantly lost over 30,000 HP when the boss had responded with an angry swipe. The lava hound's strength was terrifying. If anyone else had taken that attack, they would have likely died instantly. As soon as Aqua Rose fell silent, the lava hound arrived before the mine's entrance. Fortunately, the mine entrance was too small for the lava hound, so the boss couldn't get in. Seeing this, Aqua Rose and Kola breathed a sigh of relief. However, something then happened that stupefied Zero Wing's members. The gigantic lava hound split into 3 miniature copies. Each copy was still a level 80 mythic monster, but they did have slightly lower basic attributes. Before Zero Wing's members could react, the 3 lava hounds charged into the mine. Hurry! Hurry up! Shifeng could already hear rapidly approaching footsteps. It was obvious that the lava hound was almost to him. Meanwhile, he only needed to insert one last crystal into the ground to set the spatial coordinates. Unfortunately, the loading bar, which had swiftly filled before, felt extremely slow to Shifeng. It was only 70% full. While conducting the merging process, Shifeng couldn't do anything. He couldn't even activate a skill. When the loading bar reached 90%, 3 1-meter-tall lava hounds appeared before Shifeng. Despicable mortal! You dare violate this sacred ground. You'll pay for your crimes with your soul. The 3 lava hounds spoke in the human language, rage flaring in their eyes as they spat 3 scorching white beams at Shifeng. Like lasers, the white beams vaporized everything in their path. Chapter 1845, Evil God's Sword. Just before the 3 scorching beams slammed into Shifeng, the loading bar before him finally reached 100%. When the beams were less than 10 yards away from Shifeng, a barrier of divine runes appeared. When the 3 beams met the barrier, it shook violently. As for Shifeng, he shot backward like a cannonball. Boom! Shifeng crashed into one of the mine shaft's sturdy walls. What power! Shifeng was shocked as he stared at the mine shaft's deformed terrain. He had never thought that the lava hound would possess such frightening power even after dividing itself into 3 copies. They were currently inside a source fire vein. The walls surrounding them were sturdy and fire-resistant, especially the source fire. Ordinary flames wouldn't melt it, let alone vaporize it. One could easily imagine how high the lava hound's flames were. If those white-hot flames struck a player's equipment, not even magically enhanced dark gold equipment would survive. Only epic equipment might. If he hadn't activated Absolute Domain in time, he likely would have died from that attack. Retreat. Everyone retreat immediately. Shifeng shouted through the team chat once the flames dissipated. Kola could barely tank 1 lava hound. Now that they had to face 3 miniature lava hounds, which were only slightly weaker than the full version, he knew they couldn't stay here for a moment longer. After issuing his command, he switched the aura of Earth to the aura of space, preparing to teleport out of this map. Awoo! As Shifeng was about to escape using space movement, the 3 lava hounds howled as one. 3 light red ripples radiated from the beasts, and as if space had frozen, the 7 luminaries' ring failed to open a tear in space. Spatial lockdown? Shifeng's expression darkened when he saw the growing spatial tear before him disappear. A monster with such peerless strength and the ability spatial lockdown were a nightmare for players. Coming across one such monster almost guaranteed death. Monsters that possessed the spatial lockdown ability were extremely rare in God's domain. Normally, only NPCs at the peak of God's domain could execute the ability. Shifeng never thought that an elemental creature like the lava hound would be able to use it as well. You have touched on the almighty fire god's taboo. Sacrifice your soul to beg forgiveness from the fire god. The 3 lava hounds spoke in a chilling tone before charging at Shifeng. Although the 3 lava hounds were small, their movements were so powerful that space itself trembled in their wake. Their strength could even rival the complete lava hounds. As the 3 lava hounds approached Shifeng, they split up and assaulted Shifeng from 3 different directions, transitioning into a battle formation as smoothly as NPCs. Is this a god's guardian? Shifeng's expression turned somber as he watched the 3 lava hounds approach. It was normal in God's domain to find treasures guarded by powerful monsters, and there were some incredibly powerful existences among these guardian monsters. These guardians had been created by the gods. Normally, gods only created such powerful guardians to protect their wealth. Not only did these guardians have an eternal lifespan, but they were also undying. In addition, they commanded extremely powerful skills and spells. They were even more difficult to deal with than archaic species of the same rank and level. I can only give it a try. Shifeng gritted his teeth and used Heavenly Dragon's power before activating Divine Steps. In the next moment, 10 doppelgangers with the exact same aura and attributes as Shifeng appeared. Shifeng and his doppelgangers then charged at the 3 lava hounds. Although the lava hounds were powerful, Shifeng managed to nullify their attacks by constantly switching positions with his doppelgangers. Using this opportunity, Shifeng quickly made his way towards the mine's exit. Normally, guardian monsters would give up the chase once they were a certain distance away from what they were supposed to protect. As long as Shifeng moved out of range, he could shake off the lava hounds. However, the lava hounds were incredibly difficult to get away from. Not only was their strength incredibly high, but their speed was also impressive. They gave him no opportunities to use such tools. As twofold Berserk's duration continued to run out, Shifeng frantically searched through his bag for items that could help him out of this predicament. Suddenly, he discovered a broken longsword that had been inactive in his bag for quite some time. This long sword was none other than the evil god's inheritance, a treasured sword that had once belonged to the evil god. Seeing that the lava hounds charge at him again, Shifeng gritted his teeth and took out the evil god's inheritance. He then inserted his power into the weapon. Protecting the items that would drop if he died was undoubtedly more important than losing 10 points in all of his attributes. After Shifeng powered the sword, the evil god's inheritance pulsated. An invisible force then spread out from the sword, sweeping through the mine with so much power that even space shook with the intensity. A moment later, a deathly aura pervaded the mine shaft. Chapter 1846, Broken Sword's Power. As the aura of death saturated the mine, space itself froze. The three lava hounds slid to a halt as they glared at the broken sword in Shifeng's hand, wary. Pitch-black divine runes had appeared along the broken blade as the sword released plumes of dark smoke. The weapon felt cold and evil. The lava hounds finally discerned the broken sword's identity, and fear flashed in their eyes. It was as if they had remembered something horrific from their past. Despicable heretic! You dare set foot in this sacred land? Let the almighty fire god's flames purify your soul. After Shifeng replaced the abyssal blade with the evil god's inheritance, the broken sword seemed to trigger something in the three lava hounds. Suddenly they began to grow larger as golden flames flared across their bodies. Despite standing still, the solid rock beneath the lava hounds' feet began to crack. Space tore around them as if it couldn't withstand the golden flames' power. It was as if the space around them was no longer able to withstand the power of the golden flames. Shifeng could also sense a threat of death from that golden fire. Moreover, Shifeng could tell that this death wouldn't just end with a single lost level. He could feel a power akin to soul fire, although this was many times stronger. Burning and devouring his soul would be child's play for this strange fire. If these golden flames burned a player's soul, the player's account would likely be left permanently crippled. Before Shifeng could think of a plan to get out of this troubling situation, the three lava hounds pounced as one. At this point, Shifeng had no skills that he could use to protect himself. In addition, the lava hound's movement speed had significantly increased. With no other options, Shifeng instinctively executed Sword's Orbit. Countless sword lights enveloped Shifeng, clashing with the three gigantic flaming beasts as they attacked. Boom. The resulting impacts tore the nearby rocky ground. The scattered sparks ignited anything they touched, transforming the area into a sea of fire. The three lava hounds were thrown back, forming three large craters as they crashed into the ground. Damages of over -3,000 appeared above their heads. In contrast, Shifeng remained standing in his original position, although the ground beneath him had been burned and melted. Now he stood in a deep crater of his own that had a smooth, glassy surface. What incredible power! So, this is a weapon that had once belonged to an evil god. Shifeng was stunned as he looked at the injured lava hounds. Truthfully, the broken sword he wielded was only fragmented legendary rank. Although the weapon provided a considerable boost to strength and attack power, he hadn't expected the boost to be this intense. After all, his abyssal blade was even stronger than ordinary epic weapons, but it had never been this powerful. Meanwhile, the lava hounds before him nearly had enough strength to rival high mythic ranked monsters. Even after activating twofold berserk, he still hadn't been a match for the lava hound's strength. Yet when he had used the evil god's inheritance against these monsters, he felt as if he had hit a group of weak, powerless dogs. He hadn't felt the intense impact that he had experienced during his prior clashes with these beasts. Although he had seen weapons that could weaken an opponent's power in the past, he had never seen one as strong as the evil god's inheritance. The weapon had actually decimated Tier 4 mythic monsters' strength to such a great extent. That wasn't all. When he had clashed with the lava hounds, he had felt his own strength skyrocket. It was as if the broken sword had absorbed the monster's strength, transferring it to him. As Shifeng tried to get a better grasp on the evil god's inheritance's power, a lava hound stood up. This time, however, it did not charge at Shifeng. Instead, it howled with anger and formed a golden threefold magic array in front of itself. A moment later, a beam of fire shot out from the magic array, moving so fast that Shi Feng couldn't dodge in time. This beam was the result of the Lava Hound's Tier 4 spell, Red Lotus Breath, the same spell that had vaporized the source fire or earlier. In response, Shi Feng simply swung the evil god's inheritance at the approaching beam of fire. Boom! The broken sword sliced the crimson beam in half, the flames disintegrating the stone wall behind Shi Feng. Shi Feng stumbled 5 steps back as a damage of over -10,000 appeared above his head. Sure enough, Shi Feng was indescribably shocked, glancing down at the evil god's inheritance in his hand. As he had guessed, the evil god's inheritance could absorb an enemy's power, converting it into his own. Moreover, he had received far more power from this attack than the last. Not only had he gained 20% more strength, but his fire resistance had also increased by 30%. This ability was simply frightening. Due to this ability, his combat power had instantly soared. Moreover, he could sense that this still wasn't the evil god's inheritance's limit. Although he couldn't see the evil god's inheritance's exact attributes, when he wielded the weapon he felt that he hadn't fully grasped the broken sword's power. The broken sword could grant him even more boons depending on the strength of the attack he received. However, the provided improvements were not without a flaw: their short duration. Each time it absorbed an attack's power, the weapon's wielder could only retain it for a short 10 seconds. Even so, it was amazing. Shi Feng found it truly hard to imagine that the evil god's inheritance was still incomplete and that he only exhibited 10% of its power after sacrificing his attributes. If he could exhibit the weapon's full power, the result would be unimaginable. Most likely he'd be able to suppress the 3 lava hounds completely. One should be able to leave now. When he saw the other 2 beasts charge towards him, Shi Feng licked his lips in excitement and ran to meet his enemies in battle. Previously, the difference between their basic attributes had been too great. Even after using twofold berserk, he had been thoroughly suppressed. Now, however, his strength had surpassed the lava hounds after he had weakened them and boosted his own with the evil god's inheritance. Shi Feng relied on his superior strength and technique to push the 2 lava hounds to the side. He then dashed for the mine's entrance like a powerful gale. When the lava hounds caught up to Shi Feng, he easily threw them back with an attack. In less than 5 seconds, Shi Feng burst from the mine and back into the canyon. Thousands of lava monsters then turned to look at the swordsman. "Big Cisfire, the guild leader is out," Flying Shadow said, breathing a sigh of relief when he saw Shi Feng emerge from the mine. However, his excitement quickly faded, and a somber expression dominated his face. Thousands of lava monsters surrounded Shi Feng, including the 3 mythic lava hounds that chased after him. Even a Tier 2 assassin like him or Fire Dance would have no hope of surviving such an encirclement, much less a swordsman like Shi Feng. "I'll attract the monster's attention. Ready a defensive magic scroll and prepare to use it on the guild leader." Fire Dance felt her scalp tingle as she watched the swarm of monsters close in on Shi Feng, but she had to try to rescue her guild leader. She could feel how extraordinary the flames that enveloped the lava hounds were. If those flames claimed Shi Feng's life, he'd lose far more than a single level. Just as Fire Dance was about to dash forward, Shi Feng raised the evil god's inheritance into the air. Suddenly, the canyon's mana began to gather around the broken blade, and the sword gradually took on a mist-like state. Shi Feng swung the weapon lightly at the surrounding lava monsters. The mist-like broken sword suddenly disappeared from Shi Feng's hand and transformed into 5 pitch-black sword lights that flew at the offending monsters, devouring everything in their path. This move was the evil god's inheritance's only skill after Shi Feng had sacrificed a fraction of his attributes. Godslayer. With one attack, every chieftain and lord-ranked lava monster nearby was incinerated, their ashes scattering in the wind. The surviving monsters were heavily injured and unable to make the slightest movement. Chapter 1847, Flame Demon's Crown. When Shi Feng had swung the broken sword, the attack had carved 5 deep grooves in the rocky ground around him. The canyon's terrain had changed drastically. What great destructive power! Shock filled Shi Feng as he gazed at the evil god's inheritance in his hand. Godslayer's destructive power was even greater than that of a Tier 4 super large-scale destruction spell. He had turned several hundred level 70+ lava monsters into ash instantly. The skill truly had the power to decimate heaven and earth. Unfortunately, the monsters he had killed with Godslayer hadn't granted Shifeng any EXP. In fact, he would not gain any EXP from slain monsters while he had the evil god's inheritance active. The sword would absorb it all. After killing so many monsters, the black mist the evil god's inheritance emitted had become denser. Following which, Shifeng heard the sound of a system notification. System: Evil God's inheritance has accumulated sufficient life force and recovered the first evil god's mark, activating a portion of its power. The evil god's inheritance has such an effect? Shifeng was surprised. He had thought that he could only repair the weapon by collecting the missing fragments. He had never expected the broken blade to recover some of its lost power by absorbing others' life force. Evil God's inheritance, one-handed sword. A treasured sword that the evil god had once used. However, the sword had been destroyed in a battle, shattered into 3 pieces. Although the evil god's treasured sword had been destroyed, the evil god's power within remains intact. As long as one gathers all 3 fragments, it is possible to restore the sword to its past glory. This piece is the sword's broken hilt. By permanently sacrificing 10 points of all attributes, the user may temporarily use the sword's power. Although this sword has been severely damaged, it can still exert 1/10 of its original power. First Evil God's Mark. Power absorption can increase strength by a maximum of 100%, stamina by 20%, and all resistances by 100%. When this fragment is within 1,000 yards of other fragments, the fragments will resonate. Drops upon death. Cannot be traded. Although he could strengthen the evil god's inheritance by killing a large number of monsters, he had no intentions of doing so. While Shifeng might wield extraordinary power when he used the evil god's inheritance, he'd have to sacrifice 10 points from every basic attribute permanently each time he wielded the weapon. While 10 points in all attributes might not be much to a Tier 2 player, it would add up. If he used the weapon for too often, he would cripple his account. One could say that the evil god's inheritance was even more evil than magic weapons. Hence, the evil god's inheritance should only be used as a final trump card. Shifeng had no intentions of feeding the evil god's inheritance any more life force right now either. He only had half an hour to use the weapon after activating it. How much life force could he possibly accumulate in half an hour? However, the ability to strengthen the evil god's inheritance had truly been an unexpected boon. Following which, Shifeng charged out of the hole he had opened in the monster encirclement. Now that the evil god's inheritance had grown stronger, he had a much easier time dealing with the 3 lava hounds that chased after him. Is this the guild leader at his full strength? Flying Shadow, who watched from the valley's entrance, was astonished as he watched Shifeng take on 3 level 80 lava hounds without trouble. Even Fire Dance, who prepared to move out, was stunned. She had assumed that after so many battles and adventures, the distance between her and Shifeng had shortened. Looking at it now, however, it would seem that the gap was larger than ever. What the 2 assassins did not know was that Shifeng fully relied on the evil god's inheritance to command such power. Without it, he might not have survived even after activating twofold Berserk. Shifeng quickly escaped the lava hound's grasp, and although this further enraged the mythic monsters, they didn't dare leave their domain by as much as a centimeter. They could only watch until Shifeng left their sight. Despicable heretic. The almighty fire god will not let you get away with this. Even players several thousand yards away could see the glow. The flame demon's crown? Shifeng was flabbergasted when he saw the exquisite flaming crown inside the treasure chest. Chapter 1848. Ancient Demon. Guild Leader, did you find something good? Aqua Rose asked curiously as she watched Shifeng's blank expression. The rest of the team turned to look at Shifeng as well, anticipation flashing in their eyes. They all wanted to know what kind of treasure a fine gold treasure chest had to offer. A fine gold treasure chest was almost impossible to find in level 50+ maps. The best players normally found were secret silver rank. Meanwhile, even mysterious iron treasure chests could cause a heated struggle between guild teams. The higher quality treasure chest players found, the more of a commotion activating the treasure chest would cause. In turn, this would lead to more players finding out about the treasure chest. Moreover, after players acquired the items inside a treasure chest, there was a 2-hour period when the items would be guaranteed to drop upon death. Hence, whenever a treasure chest appeared in the fields, a slaughter would soon follow. Fortunately, Zero Wings' team didn't have to worry about being attacked. After all, this place was the Flame Demon's Valley. The only other players that might see the glow from the fine gold treasure chest were the Ninth Heaven members. Even if other players with hostile intentions discovered them, they had no fear that anyone would try to rob them. "Something good has dropped," Shifeng said, laughing. He then retrieved the Flame Demon's crown and shared its statistics in the team chat. Flame Demon's crown, head fine gold rank. Equipment requirement: Strength 800, Agility 800 and Intelligence 800, Defense plus 100 additional passive Xianxia dash. Flame Demon's body. Allows the wearer to gain the body of a flame demon, increasing fire resistance by 200 and becoming immune to burning effects. Additional active Xianxia dash. Flame Avatar. Becomes immune to all flame damage for 1 minute. Cooldown: 10 minutes. After reading the Flame Demon's crown's details, the team lost their prior excitement. Guild leader, this crown is a scam. Not only does it have such a high equipment requirement, but it doesn't actually offer any basic attributes. The only good thing about it is its high fire resistance, but it isn't worth sacrificing everything else. I feel the same. The monsters in harsh environments are generally very powerful. Although this crown can provide sufficient fire resistance to survive in these maps, without the basic attributes, you'll have a difficult time dealing with monsters. It would be much better to equip several pieces of equipment that provide less fire resistance but have significant basic attributes. Its defensive properties are even more important. No matter how I look at this crown, it doesn't seem to have any. Everyone quickly discerned the pros and cons of the Flame Demon's crown. Even level 50 common cloth armor had more than 100 defense. The Flame Demon's crown's defense was practically a useless decoration. In addition, losing the basic attributes from a piece of equipment would reduce a player's attributes by around 10%. This would cause at least a 20% reduction in combat power. Moreover, due to the lack of defense in the head section, others would have a weakness to exploit. If one were struck in the head, it was entirely possible that they'd suffer a fainted state. As God's domain continued to update, the equipment players wore would have greater importance. Equipment would play a role in a player's defense beyond basic attributes. Take 2 players with the same defense, for example. If one of these players wore chest armor while the other player did not, the player without a chest piece would receive more damage when struck in that area and suffer additional negative effects. If a player took a blow to the head, they would feel dizzy and powerless, and their reactions would become sluggish. If one were stuck in the arm, it would go numb and become difficult to move. There were subtle differences in the negative effects depending on the materials of their equipment as well. An attack's impact was one such example. During the early stages of the game, these negative effects were barely noticeable, but as players took on higher-leveled monsters, these negative effects would become more prominent. As a result, players would have to choose their equipment carefully. It wasn't enough to prioritize basic attributes. "This place is so hot," Blackie exclaimed as he looked at the flaming mountain range. Despite standing some distance away from the mountain range, he felt as if like roasting meat. Everyone on the team felt the sweltering heat. Even walking exhausted their stamina. Meanwhile, a gigantic figure wielding a trident patrolled the center of this mountain ring. Every one of this figure's movements stirred the flames around it as lava rose into the air. Even from several thousand yards away, Zero Wings' team could feel the figure's fierce aura. When they saw the Flame Demon King's true appearance, they couldn't help their gasps. Even Shifeng was shocked. Flame Demon King, elemental creature, ancient fiend, mythic, level 83. HP 720, 000, 000/720/000/000. An ancient fiend. How is this possible? Feng was indescribably shocked when he saw the Flame Demon King's statistics. Shouldn't it be an archaic species? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.